Hokage I can fully level up with one click. Chapter 581-600. Chapter 581 _ Purpose of the invitation. To Sengoku's proposal, Suru and Zephyr nodded in agreement. This made the students' scalps go numb. In the past, the three giants joined forces, and that was for any one person. It was a nightmare. Mosamoxi, I'm Bolt, please contact Zephyr. The phone worm suddenly rang. This time, it was the unsmiling, so-called Nanny Carp, Bolt's voice. After Zephyr and the others looked at each other, they also restrained their emotions and said, I'm Zephyr, Bolt is very happy to hear your voice, but didn't you celebrate with that bastard Cap? Hee hee, Mr. Zephyr, you laughed. As an adjutant, if even I am drunk, then no one can protect Mr. Garp's safety. Bolt laughed dryly and said after a short pause. Don't take offense to the three of you. This time Mr. Carp was drunk because he was going to bring his grandson into the Navy headquarters. According to my evaluation of his grandson Luffy, his strength is comparable to that of a brigadier general. If he trains a little or two, he can reach the major general. Perhaps it's because Mr. Carp is so happy to hold a banquet when he sees Luffy's outstanding performance that can make up for his shortcomings 25 years ago. Comparable to the Commodore. A flaw from 25 years ago. The first half of the speech may have only surprised them a little. But hearing the latter words made the expressions of Sengoku and others become unnatural. If that incident hadn't happened, I'm afraid that the Navy headquarters would already be one of the four generals. Nor will there be such terrifying hostile forces. That day, if Sengoku hadn't held down Garp, I'm afraid it would have been a nightmare for the Navy headquarters and even the world government. Heroes become executioners, no exception. By the way, this time, Mr. Garp got a lot of good seedlings in the East China Sea. After my evaluation, the former pirate hunter Roro Hazoro has the strength comparable to that of a colonel. The chef of the sea restaurant, Sanji Kurozu, has the strength of a colonel. There is also a sniper with a long nose. He is also very talented. He is also a good number one with training. The sniper is lacking in the Navy. As for the last two, their talents are a little worse than the four just now, but their mental will is also very good, and they will be able to take on great responsibilities in the future. Looking at the breath, Bolt introduced 6 people. The people present couldn't help but stunned for a moment, and even Zephyr couldn't refute it. After all, Bolt is nothing but Garp's lieutenant. When Capri was lazy in the Navy headquarters, Bolt served as a swordsman instructor in the Navy boot camp. There are also the chief examiners of ordinary physical examinations. His rating, however, has a wealth of experience as a disciple. It's just that the three of Sengoku didn't think of it at all. Garp, who has been looking for excuses to run to the East China Sea all day, usually leaves empty-handed and comes back empty-handed. There is no so-called Navy spirit at all, let alone, to accept new people. Now I have brought back 6 at once, that is the existence of a king. Bolt, tell me honestly, did you find these people for Carp? Sengoku couldn't help but ask. Zephyr and Crane also suddenly came to their senses. No, that was when Laxus and Mr. Carp separated, reminding Mr. Carp that the talents who went to kidnap. Mr. Carp was still skeptical, but he didn't expect that after meeting, it would be so good. Bolt said in a deep voice. Unexpectedly, Mr. Carp has been ignoring Donghai's new talents. Also, Laxus seems to be very familiar with the East China Sea. He also went to Kokoja village, not far from Mr. Carp's hometown, and took away an excellent navigator. East China Sea. If, that day, Mr. Carp could have gone to look for talents earlier, or he could have brought Laxus into the Navy headquarters. Laxus again. The expressions of the three of Sengoku changed drastically. Bolt clearly heard the inappropriateness in his words and asked in a deep voice, Marshal Sengoku, is it because of Laxus that you contacted Mr. Carp at this time? Bolt is still very concerned about this young man who has a unique vision for selecting candidates. In particular, it is possible to give 2 famous swords to a swordsman at will. This kind of fulfillment made him even more convinced. After all, every swordsman loves his sword like his life. Yes, this time, we contacted Carp for Laxus, Sengoku said in a deep voice. Not long ago, Bastius sent back information that he has a deep understanding of the 6th form and 6th form profound truth. After being appraised by me and Zepha, I intend to invite him to teach at the Navy recruit camp. It's just that when we just made a decision, Alabasta came back and disappeared, and Chiwuheke Rockdoll sought the country and was beheaded by Laxus. At the last moment, the great skeleton demon suddenly appeared and snatched the corpse away. Now the official of Alabasta is giving us a reasonable answer. Speaking of this, Sengoku paused for a while, and then said with a slightly dignified expression, "This time, the execution of Chiwahai for the country is a huge shame for our navy and even the world government." After all, the appointment of Chiwahai came from the world government. If people from the outside world knew that Chiwahai, appointed by the world government, did such absurd things, it would be a bad reputation for our Navy headquarters. The slightly elongated voice changed Bolt's breathing. For a long time, the existence of the Chiwahai system has been controversial. If it wasn't for the 5 old stars to go their own way, use the power of pirates to check and balance pirates, I am afraid it will not evolve into the current privilege issue. As Sengoku said, once this thing spreads, the situation is not handled properly. The reputation of the Navy headquarters, and the justice it insists on, will also be damaged. After all, the desert kingdom of Alabasta is like a great power, and also has a second-tier noble status. If this matter is not handled properly, it will chill the hearts of countries around the world. Marshal Sengoku, what do you need me to do? Bolt responded in a deep voice. Sengoku nodded slightly satisfied and said, Bolt, now Laxus is not on the bounty list and has no other background forces, so I hope you can invite him to join the Navy headquarters, or in the boot camp. As long as he adds a layer of Navy status, then he defeats Shichibukai and stops the sand crocodile Rockdoll's ambition to seek a country. It will also be a logical manifestation of our Navy's justice, and it can also increase our Navy's shock and deterrence force. What's more, Laxus has a deep understanding of the opposite. If he can be recruited into the training camp, the strength of our Navy will be raised to a huge level. Chapter 582-Unplug a Tiger Kiba. The slightly elongated voice, mixed with a powerful taste, was enough to show Sengoku's determination. After a moment of silence, Bolt said, Marshal Sengoku, don't worry, I will help Mr. Carp sober up now and try to arrive in Alabasta as soon as possible to deal with this matter. With your response, I'm relieved. Sengoku let out a sigh of relief. As for Carp, we'll talk about it when we get back, and I hope you all have the best of luck. After a few words of greeting, Bolt hung up the phone bug. After the 3 of Sengoku looked at each other, they fell into silence. Originally, they just thought that Chinyu only had a deep research on the 6 forms. Never thought that Chinyu would have the ability to discover talents. It can be said that the Navy headquarters has recruited a large number of new soldiers during the year. It also allows the naval branches of other sea areas to push various types of talents. However, at the end of the year, it is good to have 1 or 2 outstanding students. I never thought that the 4 people Chinyu casually recommended would have such a big evaluation in Bolt's mouth. If they can join the Navy headquarters, in time, they may really be able to add a few lieutenant generals to the Navy headquarters. Moreover, among these people, there is one, but the son of the monster has the blood of Carp and the revolutionary Dragron. The strength and potential of this younger generation must not be underestimated. However, when they thought about the issue of identity, the 3 people in the field had a bit of a headache. After all, a Garp has already brought out the scourge of the entire naval headquarters, and brought out a Chan Oil Admiral Chingzi. There is also a yellow ape who was influenced to go astray, his salary was not paid, and his work was not serious. If there is another demon king of chaos, it is completely possible to form a team. However, as far as this is concerned, they can't help thinking about it. The only thing that can be done is to hope that Carp and Bolt can bring Laxus back. Inside the Navy Square in Rogue Town, Bolt hung up the phone bug and looked at Garp, who was still snoring, frowning. The next moment, 4 piercing sounds suddenly flashed out in the dark. The speed was so fast that it cut through the sky of dozens of meters and smashed directly into his face. Bolt's expression couldn't help changing, and he was about to get out of the way. An unexpected shout made his nerves tense. "Grandpa, I don't want to go back to the Navy headquarters with you. I want to be a pirate, I want to be a big pirate like Shanks." "Damn, what Laxus, he actually sued Grandpa, and I want to avenge him now." The scolding voices echoed in the huge square. Originally, Bolt was still wondering what this meant. The next moment, a strong and powerful hand directly clasped his ankle. "Nai nai de lu fei, ni dan gan ku dang hai zai, ye bian zo si ni, rang ni chong shi shao I de tai quan ziwei." Quote. Garp blew his snot and stood up with his eyes closed. The clenched fist in his hand smashed directly at the back of Bolt's head. The violent scene made Bolt startled. I never thought that Garp, who was drunk, would treat him as Luffy, and grabbed his ankle. It's very easy to get a punch or two in the usual fight. But now, in order to avoid it, his grandson escaped, and Caperna used the strength of breastfeeding. No matter how Bolt struggles, the more force he uses. Moreover, the fast attacking fist from behind and the attack of breaking through the air made Bolt sigh helplessly. Jung. The sound of the knife sounded suddenly. A flash of cold light flashed, and the 4 wine bottles that were approaching from the front were instantly cut off in 2. At the same time, the famous knife in Bolt's hand turned over and directly blocked Garp's fist. When the dull metal collision sound echoed, and it caused a gust of wind to roll away. Feel the fist this time, hit the hard point. The drunk Garp was obviously startled, and opened his sleepy eyes. "You, aren't you Bolt? Why are you holding a knife? Are you planning to kill me while the old man is drunk?" Carp woke up most of the time. "You guy, even if you want to kill the old man, say hello to me early and let me take a bath first. Now that I'm dying of alcohol, I'm so useless." Looking at Carp, who was running the train with his mouth full as soon as he opened his mouth, Bolt also had a headache. Squeezing the muscles on his face, he said, "Mr. Carp, I advise you, if you still have the mind to talk in your sleep, why don't you hurry up and chase your grandson?" The 4 of them escaped secretly just now, as if they were going to seek revenge on Laxus. "What?" Garp's sleepy eyes suddenly became as big as Bull's eyes. "Looking around for a while, I found that there was no whereabouts of Luffy and the 4. Immediately, he shouted in a hurry, "You bastard, dare to slip away under Grandpa's eyes. You bastards, who allowed you to drink, get out of here and set sail for me. If you delay time and make my grandson a pirate, I will kill you all. As the Navy, don't you even know what discipline is?" A hysterical roar echoed in the huge square. However, in the face of these shouts, the snoring in the field was still thunderous, overpowering Garp's harsh words. "Cough, Mr. Carp, you allowed them to drink. If they want to kill you, they should kill you first." Bolt coughed dryly and explained. Garp was stunned for a moment, and shook his heavy head. In the vague memory, it seemed that there was something vaguely about it. Cheeks slightly under Yuhi, he hurriedly said, "Then you wait for them to get up, and I will swim to chase after them." "Mr. Carp, I advise you that you don't need to pursue for the time being. Not long ago, Marshal Sengoku personally contacted you and asked you to go to Alabasta to meet with Lieutenant General Bastiu. Bolt said solemnly. Meet Bastiu, isn't that guy following Laxus? Carp said with a stunned expression. Also, when Sengoku contacted me, nothing else happened, right? Recalling the farce just now, and the murderous Sengoku 3, Bolt decided not to tell Garp for the time being, and said, this time Marshal Sengoku personally contacted because there was a conspiracy related to Chiwahai in Alabasta. National Affairs. Quote. Mr. Laxus fought against Chiwahei Rockdoll and finally killed him, but behind this incident, there was a big skeleton who intervened. The matter was too complicated, and Mr. Garp was required to personally go to hand it over. Finally, Marshal Sengoku asked Mr. Garp to invite Mr. Laxus to join the Navy headquarters. What? Garp woke up suddenly, looking at Bolt with a serious face. It was not a joke at all. He never imagined that in the short period of time he was drunk. Send Kiba, a tiger from the world government. If this incident spreads out, it will definitely shock the whole sea. Chapter 583 Build the Tomb of Norisik. 3 days later, Alabasta, Rapeseed Port. A huge black shadow fluttered in the air, instantly alarming the king's army and the rebel army stationed in the port. When he saw the huge bone dragon falling from the sky, a frenzy flashed on his face. Not long ago, the battle that took place in Juba spread quickly. Of course, the disseminated version is the official unified caliber version through Wei Wei, the Princess of Alabasta. Chiwahei Rockdar intends to seek the country. Princess Wei Wei ventures out to sea, and reaches a deal with the skeleton demon and Laxus. In the end, Laxus beheaded Shichibu Heike Rockdar. According to the rules of the transaction, the big skeleton changed Yuba to a different place. Let the former yellow sand land rejuvenate. It can be said that now whether it is Laxus or the identity of the skeleton demon, it is now a heroic existence in Alabasta. As for what the Navy headquarters will say in the future, that is another matter. After all, Alabasta is the victim, and Shichibukai has the privileges granted by the world government. If you really argue, I am afraid that the Navy headquarters will not only lose face. They will also be given the title of incompetence. In the end, I will only find a peaceful and safe way. Okay, don't watch it anymore. Kosha walked over quickly. Now that K. Rockdar was beheaded by Chinyu, the misunderstanding between the king's army and the rebel army was resolved, and Kosha became an important member of Alabasta. At the same time, he was also assigned to become an official who was handed over to Chinyu. Yes. The guards quickly agreed, and reluctantly retracted their gazes. Kosha looked at the direction where the bone dragon landed with satisfaction, turned over and rode on the fast-running duck, and then walked away. After running for 2 or 3 kilometers, he finally saw the bone dragon landing on the ground in a huge sand dune basin. In addition to Chinyu, the leaders were Wei Wei, Nico Robin, Nami, and Daz, who was silent. Lord Ains, have you found the place where the great tomb of Norisik was built? Kosha hurried to the place, and hurriedly turned over and fell down. According to Wei Wei's transaction request that day, Chinyu helped to kill K. Rockdal and gave 2 great gifts at the same time. In exchange, Alabasta will lease the Rapeseed Port to Chinyu. Facing the gesture of turning the huge desert into an oasis, with a stomping of the scepter in his hand, it will rain for 7 days. This kind of magical means is surprising. It is more to hold Chinyu well and receive Chinyu well. It is said that if they are happy in the future, their desert kingdom Alabasta will be able to have a few more oases and a few torrential rains. This is much better for Alabas than those golden mountains of silver. Kusha, this desert is not far from the Rapeseed Port, and the terrain is quite hidden. Lord Chinyu intends to build the Norisik tomb here, Wei Wei said anxiously, wiping the hot sweat on her forehead. You go back now and report to my father. and let my father gather some people to help Lord Chinyu to build the great tomb of Narisik as soon as possible. Wei Wei was confused about the name of the building mentioned in Chinyu's mouth, which was named after the tomb. However, she knew very well that all this had nothing to do with her. There is only one thing she has to do. Do your best to assist the boy in front of him, who can't figure out the depths, and do everything within his power. According to the reminder given by Lord Chinyu that day, the size of the tomb is too large. We plan to dispatch 30,000 soldiers to help Lord Chinyu build it. Ko Sha said after a moment of hesitation. As for the materials needed for the construction, King Cobra is willing to support it unconditionally, but it will take about a year. After all, a lot of materials need to be excavated and sold overseas. According to Chinyu's description, the requirements for the construction of the large tomb of Narisik reached the level of a palace. What's more, they still need to ask Chinyu for Alabasta in the future. Now it can be considered to be full of strength, intending to help Chinyu to build the great tomb of Nalashik. It's just that Alabasta has been in civil strife for a long time, and it's obviously a bit overwhelming. No need, this is my own business, and the amount of work is not as huge as you think. It only takes a moment to be enough, Chinyu said lightly. For a moment, the people present couldn't help but startled, and their faces were stunned. In their eyes, the construction of a huge tomb building with 8 floors reaching the rock formations of the earth, the amount of work is no less than that of the royal palace in Al Napa. Now Chinyu said that it can be done in an instant. If he hadn't heard it himself, who would believe it? However, recalling that not long ago, Chinyu turned the desert into an oasis. That godlike means made it impossible for them to refute. Lord Chinyu, you're our benefactor of Alabasta, please don't think it's troublesome for us, so you refuse our help. Wei Wei expressed her position in a hurry. However, oncoming him was Chinyu's warm hand. Under Wei Wei's astonished gaze, it directly covered her head. After rubbing it fondly, he said, "Don't worry, I'm a cheap man, and I'll never let it go. Of course, the favor you owe me in Alabasta is to be repaid, but it's not now." Everyone stepped back a little bit, and the time was delayed a lot. The magic power in the body has returned to the original, and it is time to build the great tomb of Narisik. 3 days ago, after the fidelity of Bone King's character template was improved, in addition to unlocking the 8th order undead magic and resurrecting the dead, also has the ability to summon the great tomb of Narisik. The construction of the tomb of Narisik was not very useful to Chinyu, who liked to roam around the sea. However, just as Laxus built Fairy Tale, the great tomb of Narisik was summoned, and that was to increase the realism of the Bone King's template again. Looking at the scattered crowd, Chinyu turned into the character template of the Bone King under the endless black mist rolling over his body. The 5 fingers of Senbai's right hand suddenly clenched under the scepter. A huge wave of magic power surged wildly in his body. The robes on the body are even more screeching without the wind. Feeling this huge sense of oppression, the expressions of everyone present changed drastically. Without thinking too much, he quickly retreated. However, during this process, their eyes were always locked on Chinyu, desperately trying to figure out what form the huge tomb of Narisik was built in. However, this idea just popped into my mind. The scepter clenched in Chinyu's hand suddenly stomped on the ground under the watchful eyes of the public. Boom! A dull voice suddenly sounded. Everyone present was stunned for a moment, and an inexplicable suffocating energy quickly swept away with Chinyu as the center. Chapter 584-Mysterious Gravekeeper. Summon, Great Tomb of Narasar. The hoarse voice suddenly sounded. A huge tidal wave of magic power exploded in Chinyu's body in an instant. It felt like a flood burst. Wherever he passed, the earth roared like thunder. The endless yellow sand is madly rolled back. It was as if a huge sandstorm had formed. Earthquakes, sandstorms, and huge waves all come together, giving people the feeling of doomsday. In the face of this violent scene, if the bone dragon hadn't stopped in front of them in time. Single quote. I am afraid that it has already been swept away by the endless sandstorm. The only fortunate thing is that the wind and sand together only lasted for a few dozen seconds, and they were completely annihilated between heaven and earth. The roar of the rolling rock formations gradually subsided at this moment. When everyone came back to their senses, they hurriedly looked at Chinyu. The first to enter the eye, it is a huge desolate, simple, like a 10-meter-high Morihan cemetery building. The violent scene shook everyone's nerves, and under the pupil contraction, he couldn't help rubbing his eyes. However, even if they rubbed their eyes at Yuhi, the huge desolate building in front of them still did not disappear in front of them. At this moment, they finally understood why Chinyu refused Weiwei's kindness to help. In their eyes, the huge tomb of Narisik, like a palace, was really going to be built in Chinyu's hands. Just a thought. Similar to the Yuba Oasis. This ride is a miracle. Okay, Daz, bring K-Rockthal,'s body and come with me. Chinyu greeted him without turning his head, and walked straight to the entrance of the great tomb. As a gift from the system, he can go anywhere with just a thought. However, Chinyu did not know whether there was anything else in it. On the contrary, there was a vague expectation. Looking at Chinyu's footsteps, a huge door of light opened in front of him. Under the watchful eyes of the public, the whole person directly immersed in it and disappeared. The people present suddenly remembered another important thing. Resurrect Rock Doll. Chinyu beheaded K-Rockdar in public that day, they are still vivid in their minds. After a lapse of 3 days, the so-called Great Tomb of Narisik was built not only in an instant. Now I plan to bring back K-Rockthal, who died 3 days ago and is one of the 7 Seas. It was completely beyond their comprehension. However, in the face of Chinyu again and again, he showed miraculous means. After everyone looked at each other subconsciously, they quickly followed. Daz even picked up the specially made coffin and quickened his pace. At this moment, there was an inexplicable expectation in his heart. The words of resurrecting a dead person seem very nonsense. But facing the unfathomable Chinyu, Daz seemed to have caught a life-saving straw. Messy thoughts flashed in everyone's mind. After passing through the huge portal, a gloomy and cold wind hit him. After making everyone shudder uncontrollably, everything in front of them changed in an instant. A huge and empty palace, with large statues on both sides standing on the Jinchuriki column, eventually spread to the end of the hall. A luxurious king chair, adorned with various crystals, representing power, rests on it as if it were eternal. Seeing the scene in front of them, the expressions of Weiwei and the others couldn't help changing. They never imagined that the huge tomb that was built up in a single thought would be so different from the mausoleum they imagined. Feeling the oppressive aura that filled this place, Weiwei couldn't help but take a half step forward. Chinyu is big. Boom. A low piercing sound suddenly sounded. The biting cold wind, with an inexplicable depressing breath, rolled across the sky. Facing the figure that appeared in front of her without warning, Weiwei's expression changed drastically. For a moment or 3, it was impossible to react in time. Wan Ziqian Yuhi, Nico Robin took the lead in drinking. Compared with Weiwei, Robin, who had always been busy escaping for his life in the past, obviously has no combat experience comparable to that of a royal princess. Facing such a mysterious place, the moment she set foot on it, she became very energetic. With the hands quickly intertwined, with the help of the ability of Wawa fruit, dense arms quickly spread out from the ground, and caught the attacking figure. At the same time, Daz, who was carrying the coffin, unfolded the steel blade under his feet and quickly slid out of the crowd. He has not officially joined Qinyu's command, but in the face of this crisis, he still chose to take action. Mote slash. When the hands and fingers suddenly spit out the sharp blades, there is no trace of fancy. He slammed towards the incoming black shadow. Boom. The dull and thunderous collision sound suddenly echoed. The moment Daz slammed his hands on the shadow, his face changed dramatically. With the ability to slash fruit quickly, the slashing power displayed by him has not only been defeated by Qinyu all along, but have not tasted a defeat. Now that this shot fell, Daz felt like he was hitting an iron plate. 6th Order Magic Frozen's Death Sigh. The cold voice was not mixed with the slightest emotion. The moment the voice fell, the biting cold wind suddenly reverberated in the sigh. The violent sense of crisis made Nico Robin's face change dramatically, and he hurriedly shouted, "Daz, hurry back." When the voice fell, a huge black shadow was entwined, and a thin layer of ice crystals appeared on the arm created by the ability of Wawa fruit. The next moment, under the watchful eyes of the public, he was quickly frozen in ice. Before they could react, the cold wind rushed towards them. Wherever he passed, the ground was quickly frozen. Decapitated Kiba. Boom. The ice crystals on the shadow were instantly shattered. A huge light blue body, nearly 3 meters long, appeared in front of everyone. The axe and spear in his hand swung abruptly and slashed towards Dazly, who could not be avoided. For a time, the air was humming, and ice crystals were surging along the way. Facing the oncoming attack, Daz didn't have time to think about it, and quickly raised his hands to block. Boom. The huge force vented, like a galloping horse, causing Daz's internal organs to be shaken. The whole person flew out like a cannonball. Hit hard on the Jinchuiki column tens of meters away. If the coffin hadn't been taken off earlier, I'm afraid this blow, Crocodile's corpse, would have turned into Meat-chan. After all, Daz has the ability to cut fruit quickly, and his whole body is said to be as strong as steel. It was also chopped right now, and it shook the internal organs, which is enough to prove the power of this blow, which can definitely easily split a pirate ship. However, the messy thoughts just flashed in Daz's mind, and the cold words that fell in his ears hit his soul like a heavy hammer. Goodbye, warriors who dare to confront me head-on. Chapter 585-MLM Style Brainwashing Loyalty. At this moment, the cold and piercing voice seemed to be infinitely amplified. Falling in Daz's ear, there is a kind of death-like feeling. He never imagined that not long ago, under Qinyu's hands, he would get a small life back. Now facing the threat of death. At this moment, the honor of the former strong man was completely gone. Facing the axe spear that appeared in his pupils and quickly slashed towards him, his hands were still in severe pain from the collision just now, and he obviously couldn't catch up. The only thing you can do is to watch death come to you. Cocytus, that's enough. Qinyu's voice suddenly sounded. At this moment, for everyone, it is like the sound of heaven. Looking at the axe and spear that fell head-on, it stopped abruptly when it was an inch away. The fierce slashing and slashing wind swept through, bringing a crackling sound like rain hitting a banana. It even made people feel that the pupils contracted suddenly, and everything was frozen in the place where the wind passed. Even Daz's body surface has a thin layer of ice crystals. However, when they saw clearly the appearance of the person who made the sneak attack, their faces were full of disbelief. This is a giant insect man. At least, the first adjective that flashed in their minds was this one. About 3 meters high, it looks like it is covered in light blue armor, with 4 arms and a well-defined tail. A pair of eyes suddenly turned and landed on Qinyu. Under the rotation of the huge body, in front of everyone's eyes, he suddenly knelt down on one knee. the guardian of the fifth floor of the great tomb of Nazareth, Cocytus, see the great supreme being, Lord Ains Ergen. At this moment, the loud and clear voice seemed to be filled with magical sounds, echoing in the huge palace, and there was no way to disperse it for a long time. Looking at the insect man who suddenly appeared in front of him and pressed DOS. He even called Chin Yu an adult. Then his identity is self-evident. I am afraid it is the tomb keeper of the great tomb of Nazareth. Right now, a gravekeeper is so powerful. If there are more than a few, I am afraid it will be a nightmare. Perhaps, sensing the thoughts of Nico Robin and the others, Cocytus suddenly raised his head and said respectfully, Lord Ains, this subordinate has just woken up from a deep sleep. It's just that I haven't found any trace of Albedo, Shaltir Bradfrin and others. May I ask Ains-sama, what is going on here? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of Nico Robin and others changed drastically. Especially Daz, who has suffered so much, his expression is even more livid. A tomb guard has already made them suffer. According to Cocyster, he is not the only one who guards the grave, there are also unknown numbers. If this news spreads out, I am afraid it will cause a sensation in the whole world. After all, the great skeleton demon was born not long ago, and in the eyes of outsiders, he was just alone. However, just by one person, the Navy headquarters was toyed with applause. There are still an unknown number of subordinates with unknown strength, which is a huge force. It's a nightmare for anyone. Co-sister, I'm glad to see you who are loyal. Chin Yu was also a little surprised. I thought that the system was only giving away the empty tomb of Nazareth, and it would take him time to collect some younger brothers and fill it up. I never thought that a 100-level NPC would be sent directly. This is said to be one of the 4 strongest in hand-to-hand combat in the Great Tomb of Nazareth. Known as the Ice Ruler. The occupations are Juggernaut, Asura, Niflheim Knight, etc. If it is released, I am afraid that it will be able to compete with the general level. As for the outcome, Chin Yu did not dare to draw a conclusion. Hearing this, Cocyster was stunned for a moment, and said excitedly, Thank you for your kindness, Lord Ains. It is Cocyster's honor to be able to wake up first and be driven by Lord Ains. I just didn't know that these weak bugs are the guests of Ains-sama, so they acted recklessly. I hope Ains-sama will punish him severely. Looking at Cocyster, who had finished his harsh words, holding the axe and spear in both hands and handing it to Chin Yu. This kind of loyalty, but even Chin Yu was taken aback. As for Daz and the others, their expressions turned even bluer. Look at him and Nico Robin as the strongest cadres in the Bar Rock Work Club. Usually people are frightened by the wind, and they never thought that it would reach the mouth of this insect man. It will become a weak bug. However, thinking of the violent confrontation just now makes people unable to refute. Especially Daz, he was still a little arrogant when he repeatedly invited Chin Yu not long ago. Otherwise, he would not refuse Chin Yu's deal and seek to make his ambition clear by death. I thought Chin Yu could not do without him. It never occurred to me that if Chin Yu's subordinates just walked out of a grave guard, he would not be able to compete with him. The huge gap between the front and the back made Daz unacceptable for a moment. Co-sister, you are not wrong. As the cemetery keeper of the Nazareth necropolis, I am very pleased with your due diligence. I am also very happy to see you, Chin Yu said in a deep voice. The scepter in his hand, facing the ground, suddenly stomped, and said, However, before I gave an order, you shot without authorization, that is a very big mistake. Now, I'm going to punish you, then be more loyal to me, and make a name for the necropolis of Nazareth. The awe-inspiring voice echoed in the huge palace. Originally, everyone thought that Chin Yu was going to punish Co-sister. I didn't think of it at all, I just sold dog meat with a sheep's head, said a few harsh words, and then comforted him again. However, looking at co-sister's excited gaze and slapped his chest heavily to signal his allegiance, the people present couldn't help but be stunned. "Thank you for your kindness, Lord Ains. The weapon in co-sister's hand will split everything. May the great tomb of Nazarick be supreme, and the glory of Lord Ains will spread throughout this land." The rolling voices gave people a deafening feeling. In the face of this unquestionable gesture of Chichester, in the minds of everyone present, only a thought flashed. The insect man in front of him was absolutely brainwashed by pyramid schemes. "I am afraid that Chin-Yu now, let him die." Without hesitation, he directly drew his sword and killed himself. Of course, in the face of such a fanatical co-sister, they didn't dare to make trouble. The only thing they could do was to stand aside and stare obediently. "Okay, Cosette, I have seen your loyalty. Now you, wait on the side and allow me to settle other trivial matters first." Chin-Yu replied in a deep voice. He is very confident about the loyalty of the NPCs in the original Bone King. After all, that kind of die-hard loyalty is completely worthy of the pyramid scheme brainwashing. Chapter 586-Resurrection Rock Doll. As ordered. Co-sister readily stepped aside, but at the foot of the high platform near the king chair. The axe gun in his hand stomped towards the heavy floor, making a dull crashing sound. That awe-inspiring aura fully interprets what it means to be loyal and die. "Cough, Daz, bring K. Rockthall's body up." Chin-Yu couldn't help coughing dryly at co-sister's appearance. It was indeed beyond his expectations. However, with the establishment of the Great Tomb of Nazarick, Chin-Yu could not stay here for a long time. It can be said that the appearance of co-sis also solved Chin-Yu's worries. Bang! The dull coffin was placed on the ground by Daz. In order to prevent the death of Rock Doll, the body will rot due to the hot weather. Chin-Yu cast freezing magic in the coffin, temporarily refrigerating it. Of course, it wasn't that Chin-Yu didn't want to revive K. Rockdoll earlier. Just to pretend, try to extend the scope of superposition magic and the change of heaven and earth to the maximum. Directly squandering all the magic power of the character template of the Bone King, even the old bottom is exhausted. It can be said that reaching overdraft is not surprising. As an 8th order magic, the magic power required for the resurrection of the dead is no less than that of superposition magic. A heaven-defying method that can make people recover from Huang Izumi. "Open the coffin." Chin-Yu suddenly stood up and walked towards Daz. The condescending attitude, at this moment, made Chin-Yu's whole body mixed with the inexplicable oppressive taste of Kun facing the world. Feeling this breath, Daz's expression changed, and he knelt down in public with a thud. Lord Chin-Yu, can you really revive Lord K. Rockdoll? If you can, I hope you will be merciful for a while." As the top cadre of Rockdale, Daz clearly knew his temper. Once he is really resurrected, I am afraid that he will violently attack Chin-Yu involuntarily. He could not be beaten before he was alive, and if he is resurrected after death, the result is probably no exception. Daz didn't want to, and K. Rockdoll came back to life. He was immediately beheaded again. "Don't worry, he is still useful to me, but if he really messes up, he still needs a lesson or two," Chin-Yu said lightly. Looking at this scene, Daz hesitated for a moment, then nodded and thanked Kiba. "Thank you, Lord Chin-Yu." As soon as the voice fell, Daz stood up and looked at the heavy coffin behind him. His right hand snapped upwards. Dust explosion slash. Boom. The lid of the coffin, which was sealed with ice, was overturned. Rockdar frozen in it. Rockdal, who was known as one of the 7 Seas and had the title of Sand Crocodile, ended up in today's end. While everyone felt embarrassed, they wanted to see more urgently whether Chin-Yu brought K. Rockdar back to life. Looking at Chin-Yu who was slowly approaching the coffin, Daz took a few steps back and swallowed like the others. Before they could react, the scepter in Chin Yu's hand suddenly stomped toward the ground. Boom! The crisp echo sounded like a dull thunder. A pitch-black magic power rushed out of Chin Yu's body. In the end, it hit the ceiling with a wild attitude. A huge magic circle suddenly spread out and covered the entire palace. A dark shadow quickly appeared behind Chin Yu. The next moment, before everyone could react, it finally turned into the shadow of the god of death holding a sickle. Under the watchful eyes of the public, he cut his abdomen with his backhand. PFF'd. The huge hole was cut open in the abdomen. A hazy light group flashed quickly in the abdomen. One head plunged into the coffin. Rokdal, who was originally frozen, suddenly opened his eyes. Under the gradual focus of Wushan's pupils, there is a hint of color. Looking at this scene, the movements in Chin Yu's hands did not stop. The scepter stomped toward the ground, and the thick ice crystals quickly melted away. Losing these restraints, Rokdal's rigid body quickly regained consciousness. The gradually brightened eyes locked on Chin Yu's body with a turn of Gulu. "You bastard, I'm going to kill you." Along with the hysterical roar, Rokdal swayed and rushed out of the coffin. The violent scene shook everyone's nerves. They were already guessing. However, I never thought that Rokdal would actually make a move. However, before Chin Yu could react, a light blue afterimage had already appeared in front of him. Slash before the axe. With the deep voice, Rokdal's face changed drastically, and he didn't have time to think about it. He quickly raised the golden hook in his hand to block. Boom! The dull collision sound came out, and the huge impact force was vented, and Rokdal flew out like a sandbag. In the end, it hit the wall dozens of meters away. PFF'd. Rokdal opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, and looked up hastily, looking at his hands full of disbelief. "No, it's not possible, my devil fruit ability, where have I gone, why can't I perform elementalization?" Rokdal roared frantically. Chin Yu frowned slightly, although he had already expected that once a person died, he would lose his devil fruit ability. "However, I did not expect that even casting resurrection magic that does not belong to this world would not be able to get rid of this law." Hum. A slight air vibration sounded suddenly. A strange force emerged from Chin Yu's perception. Turning back to the throne, I was the first to catch my eye. It was a rapidly mutating fruit placed on the table. I saw that the apples that were originally fresh yuhi color quickly turned into a khaki color. There were even more blossoms on it, like a cloud-like pattern. Seeing this strange scene, Chin Yu couldn't help but jump in his heart. Rokdal is lost, the devil fruit ability. However, because of the resurrection of the deceased, in Huang Izumi, all the targets of the spell can be robbed of the sun. Together with the fruit demon in the body of Rokdal, he was also awakened. However, the re-emergence of the devil fruit is the same as the ability of Blackbeard to cast the dark fruit and seize the fruit in the original book. Will be selective, attached to other fruits. What the hell is going on here? Where did my devil fruit powers go? Rokdal growled. For him, the biggest reliance on the seed all his life is the ability to rustle fruit. Now suddenly deprived of the power to survive, it can be said that it is a nightmare. "Lord Rokdal, calm down." Daz rushed up first and explained anxiously, "Have you forgotten that you are dead? It was Lord Chin Yu who brought you back to life." Chapter 587 What I can take away I can give. I'm dead. Rokdal is stunned. In the chaotic mind, the scene of the day flashed, and finally settled on the punch of the thunder disc. Huo Ran looked up at Chin Yu and roared sharply. "You bastard, you dare to kill me." As a dignified veteran pirate and one of the Chihuahai, when did Rokdal think that he would end up in this situation? Do not. It should be said that when he was dying, he did not think about it. If it wasn't for him to live a new life, I'm afraid he wouldn't even know he died. Weak ants, you dare to be disrespectful to Ains-sama, and let me kill you here. Kasister's icy voice sounded. The axe and spear in his hand slammed towards the ground and inserted directly into the thick floor. The next moment, the right hand flipped down, and the spatial fluctuations opened. As soon as his right hand was caught in the void, a large knife about 2 meters long, with a golden back and a blue blade was taken out by Kasist. God-slaying sword emperor. Kasister clenched the handle of the knife suddenly with both hands, and the blue blade pointed at the moment of K-Rockthal. A huge magic force rolled backwards. The biting cold wind, under the tide, was directly frozen in ice. Feeling this breathtaking energy, the expressions of the people present suddenly changed drastically. Rockthal, who was locked by the air machine, seemed to have fallen into an ice cellar. The gaze that looked at Kasister was full of disbelief. As a rare big pirate in this sea, he has the experience of 100 battles, but he clearly knows that this weird insect man is in front of him. The breath exuded is definitely not worse than him. However, for such a powerful being, Ains-sama could be eaten in one bite. Does this mean that he is Chinyu's subordinate? Lord K-Rockthal, stop it quickly, this is Lord Chinyu's subordinate and the tomb guardian of the great tomb of Nazarick. Now you are not his opponent at all. Daz persuaded urgently. Also, as a condition for resurrecting you, I promise to serve him for 3 years with Lord K-Rockthal. The slightly elongated voice was like an invisible hammer at this moment, hitting K-Rockthal*s nerves. Looking at Daz, his face was full of disbelief. He never thought that he was not only killed, but also resurrected by his enemies. Now to serve the enemy. If he hadn't heard it with his own ears, he would never have believed that he would end up like this. Kasister, please forgive his rudeness, after all, he was killed by me. Chinyu said lightly. Kasister couldn't help but startled, and the violent magic power that was released immediately dissipated. He put away the god-slaying sword emperor in his hand, and said, it turns out that it was Lord Ains's defeated general. It's because my subordinates are too reckless, thinking that this kind of defeat can hurt Ains-sama. I hope you forgive me. Looking at Kasister, who confessed to himself as soon as he opened his mouth, Chinyu couldn't help but have a headache. To NPC is beyond doubt. This kind of attitude that any fault is his own fault is also a headache. The daring and loyal Kasister, Chinyu did not intend to entangle him too much. As for K-Rockthal, I'll give you 2 paths now. 1, like Daz, serve me for 3 years and then return to freedom. 2, seek revenge from me and be killed again. For you who are hiding in this weak sea and eliminated by history, I can kill you once, and I can kill you a second time. The deep voice came out, and at this moment, it seemed to be infused with a magical sound, which echoed in the heaven and earth for a long time and could not be dissipated. Daz's expression couldn't help changing, and he hurriedly looked back. Master K-Rockthal, only by being alive can you have endless possibilities. What's more, as Master Chinyu said, our choices were all wrong back then. Without the ability of the devil fruit, how could you defeat Master Chinyu? If you really want to shoot, then waiting for you, it will be death. The hurried words are like torture from the soul. Scolded him without mercy, and Krokdar's expression stiffened. K-Rockthal, you once told me that the weak should conform to the strong, and you are no worse than me, are you? Nico Robin suddenly spoke up. Rockdale's expression changed, and he said in a deep voice, Nicole Robin, I didn't expect you to care about me. I care about you. Nicole Robin shook her head with a playful smile and said, K-Rockdale, you seem to have misunderstood something. I don't care about you, but as a person of Lord Chinyu, I just follow my interests. It can be said that your submission is only to maximize the benefits of this farce. Of course, if you insist on seeking death, it will not harm Sir Chinyu. Chang's voice echoed in the empty palace hall. The eyes of many present all fell on Rochdale's body, bringing an inexplicable pressure. Life and death. As Daz said, he lost the ability of the devil fruit, and the result is already obvious. Thinking of this, Crochdale raised his head and said, "Okay, very good, I can serve you for 3 years, but I want to know that my strength has been greatly reduced after losing the ability of the devil fruit. I am afraid that even Daz also can't win." Having said that, Crochdale looked at it, Cosister glanced at it, and said, "You have a lot of strong men, I want to know, what's the use of staying? If you are innocent, in order to humiliate me and let me do some trivial things, then I would rather you kill me again." As one of the 7 Bukai, the former strong man, Rochdale was right. Almost all of his strength comes from the devil fruit ability. Especially after coming to Alabasta, he ignored the 2-color domineering prevailing in the New World. Moore is obsessed with intrigue, and the capture of Pluto. However, now that he lost the ability of Sha fruit, for Rochdale, it can be said that 90% of his combat power has been deprived. As he said, without the ability of Sha fruit, whether it can defeat Daz is another matter. Haha, Rochdale, I didn't see you wrong. I would rather die than be humiliated. Chin-Yu laughed. However, don't worry, I can give it if I can take it away. I want you to work under my command after you are reborn, and you will become stronger. This is your rustling fruit. The voice fell, and Chin-Yu's right hand probed into the air. The Sha fruit that was originally placed on the high platform was directly ingested by Chin-Yu. Looking at this familiar old man, Rochdale's expression couldn't help but get excited. Chapter 588-Bondewald. Lord Rochdale, is this your devil fruit? Daz's expression changed involuntarily. He is full of yearning for Rochdale. However, that is the way of the strong. If Rochdale loses the ability of the devil fruit, even himself is inferior. For Daz, it will inevitably be a little awkward in the heart. Now Chin-Yu has not only resurrected Rochdale, but also the lost and found devil fruit. This is simply subverting their cognition. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, I'm afraid no one would want to believe that the scene in front of them is true. This is indeed my salsa fruit. Rochdale barely suppressed the excitement in his heart. It can be said that when I found out just now that I had lost the rustling fruit, which is the strength of a strong man, Rochdale felt a drowning feeling in his heart. However, now that it was lost and found, after the excitement in his heart dissipated, Rochdale looked at Chin-Yu with a completely different look. A moment ago, for Chin-Yu who killed himself, his heart was full of hatred and anger. But now that I calm down and think about everything, my spine is chilled. The young man in front of him not only has the ability to switch identities. At the same time, he also has the means to change the world, and even he who thought he was dead can be resurrected. It is to keep the fruits that should have been lost here. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, I'm afraid no one would even believe the 4 emperors on this sea. Perhaps the little ghost in front of him is now inferior to the so-called 4 emperors. A strange idea came up in Rochdale's heart. The people in front of them will probably surpass them in time. Thinking of this, Rochdale said in a deep voice, "I don't know how you got the rustling fruit again, but you don't have to worry about it. Will I regret it after I have the devil fruit ability again? Repent." Chin-Yu smiled genially and said, "Haha, I still have some confidence in my own personality. However, if you have to escape, no matter where you escape, the end will be the same, not to mention, don't you want to become stronger, such as taking revenge?" Revenge. Rochdale's expression changed, he looked at Chin-Yu and said, "Okay, very good, no matter in terms of conditions or strength. You are all in line with my ambitions, I agree to your request, but you can't force me to do it, I don't like it. Things. Quote. Hee, don't worry, you are just the first person I want to recruit. Next, I have a few good goals. Anyone else? Rocktle's eyes flickered, and he looked at Chin Yu, who was full of mystery. During this period of contact, Rocktle knew very well that Chin Yu would never recruit some unknown people. However, he couldn't help but be a little curious about who he was going to pull into the team and let Crocodile. A new world, in an unknown sea. Under the raging winds, hurricanes and waterspouts were incessant, stirring the entire sea area. Fist-sized hailstones were mixed in the torrential rain, under the thunder and lightning, giving people a feeling of doomsday. This is the living environment of the new world. The crisis is not only from the pirates, but more from the natural persecution that emerges from time to time. Decades ago, Roger, the Pirate King, and the Flying Pirates, Admiral Golden Lion Shiki, were almost buried in the sea when they finally faced off. Even the strongest existence at sea could not escape this kind of catastrophe. Suffice it to say that there are exceptions, but most of them are just nonsense. Boom! The three huge naval battleships directly broke through the waves, braved the majestic heavy rain, and moved forward quickly. The faces of the Navy soldiers stationed on the deck were full of livid blue. In the face of such bad weather, a trace of worry and fear flashed on his face more or less. However, when his eyes fell on the back standing on the bow deck, he still insisted on biting Kiba. General Sakazuki, this weather will not only be very dangerous to advance in the rain, but I'm afraid it will not be able to catch up with the remnants of the walled pirates. Ghost Spider said solemnly. In the face of this weather, he didn't even have the chance to touch the cigar he smoked on weekdays. You bastard, this is already the third siege, why can you let him escape? Akainu's face was gloomy, and he growled angrily. This time, he attacked the outbound Tianlong people fleet. At this juncture, the nature is very bad. Don't forget what happened in the Chambord Islands not long ago. If the Tianlong people are injured again, or die in the attack, then the world government will have no confidence in our naval headquarters at all. The rolling voices were filled with resentment. Even the Ghost Spider, a vice admiral, couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. They know clearly that Akainu, as a general, is invincible every time he makes a shot. In the face of the Emperor of the Sea, they are all reluctant to give in. To Chan Oil, what he insists on is unbreakable justice. However, for Akainu, everything that happened on the Chambord Islands was Waterloo. Especially at the end, the Tianlong people were beheaded in public. The Navy headquarters tried their best to dig 3 feet into the ground, but still couldn't find the great skeleton demon. The gesture of disappearing out of thin air and slipping away under his nose made Akainu feel an unusual embarrassment every time he thought about it. Akainu, it's Marshal Sengoku's call. It looks like we can take a break first. Kasaragi's sloppy voice came from the cabin. This made all the Navy soldiers look relieved. Normal weather, sailing in the New World, for them, is already huge physical work. It's a huge burden on the body to brave such bad weather right now. A little bit of carelessness may lead to a point of no redemption. Mosamoshi, I'm Sengoku, Sakazuki, please reply immediately. The phone bug's call rang again. Akainu, who was standing on the bow, had a face full of reluctance, but in the face of the identity of Marshal Sengoku, he snorted coldly and took over the phone bug. I'm Akainu, do you have any orders? As soon as the phone was connected, Sengoku breathed a sigh of relief and said, Akainu, according to the weather, there will be a Category 10 hurricane in the sea area where you are located, which has exceeded the range that the warship can withstand. I now order, you return immediately and wait for the new pursuit layout. Return. Akainu shouted in a deep voice, we have been hunting for 3 days in a row. If this storm hadn't suddenly intervened, I would have been able to sink the remnants of the Walder pirates into the sea. You let me retreat now, all the efforts I made were wasted. Marshal Sengoku, you don't intend to put your hopes on those so-called kibukai, they are just wine bags and rice bags. Chapter 589 Recruitment from Lord Chinyu. Wine bag and rice bag. The expressions of the Navy soldiers and generals present couldn't help but stagnate. The only person who can evaluate the shichibukai, which is valued by the world government, as a wine bag and a rice bag, is probably the only Akainu. Looking at the naval headquarters, Chiwahai is an existence that even the veteran lieutenant generals dare not despise. Akainu, I know you are unconvinced, but our Navy headquarters does not allow failure now, and issued the Chiwahai recruitment order, that is to win. Sengoku said in a deep voice. As the Admiral of the Navy, the things that happened one after another during this period of time made him devastated. As a marshal, he has to bear more than Akainu's expression changed one after another. HMPH, those guys are all just Byakugan wolves. Even under the Chiwahai summoning order, how many people responded? Facing Akainufu's soft tone, Sengoku secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Now Hawkeye, Doflamingo, Moonlight Moria, Hexia Jinping, Storm Kun Bear, and Empress Hancock have all received replies. Can be dispatched. Quote. Chiwahai, there are 6 responses. Huang Yuan said with a crooked mouth, this result is really unexpected. HMPH, this group of guys probably thinks that our Navy has a mortal heart for Wald, and thinks that we can use less energy to be so active. Akainu snorted coldly. However, that guy K. Rockville is still the same. If it wasn't for the identity of Shichibukai, I would have sunk him into the sea long ago. If in the 7 martial seas, most people will not be there. This may be excusable. Now everyone agreed to be dispatched, but K. Rockdale did not respond. That becomes a bit of an alternative, and incompatible. No, I'm afraid you won't be able to sink Croc Darlu in the future. Not long ago, he was in Alabasta, intending to seek a country, and was executed by the then King Kobsha, hired by Laxus. Sengoku said in a deep voice. What? The expressions of everyone present changed drastically. A moment ago, they were still feeling troubled by the existence of Chiwahai. Now someone told them that K. Rockville was beheaded. Moreover, this person is also Admiral Sengoku, who wants to believe that all this is true if he hadn't heard it himself. Laxus. Is it the kid I met on the 9 Snake Pirates? Akainu said gloomily. Yes, that guy, Sengoku said in a deep voice. However, Akainu, I warn you, don't do anything to that guy, otherwise don't blame me for holding you accountable. Can't do it. For that day, Akainu was in the Chambord Islands and fought against an unidentified boy. It was also smashed by a punch, and the matter of the molten giant dog was also circulated in the naval headquarters. What's more, the ghost spider set off with the team that day, for the person who was called Husband Kun by the pirate Queen Hancock. It was simply an indelible impression. If you have to find a word to describe it, it is the public enemy of all men. Now Sengoku suddenly told them that he didn't just kill Shichibu Heike Rockdoll. Akainu is not allowed to seek revenge. This change in attitude is a bit too big. Sengoku, I want an explanation, why? Akainu said angrily, his face sank. For him, the skeleton demon made his face as a general swept away. The appearance of Laxus made him even worse. It can be said that in the face of Akainu's doubts, there was a hint of urgency on the faces of those present. After all, it was the first time they saw that Sengoku would favor an outsider. He is Bastiu's teacher now, and his physical skills are higher than Zepha's. We have reached a consensus that we will invite him to join the naval boot camp as the chief instructor. Sengoku said in a deep voice. The expressions of Akainu and the others changed drastically. They thought of many reasons, but they never thought that Sengoku would give such an answer. Sengoku, are you joking? This joke is not funny, the old man's knowledge is deep, we all know, You are now letting a guy of unknown origin to train new recruits. Is this old confusion? Akainu said in a deep voice. In the Navy, except for Garp, he was the only one who dared to speak to the dignified admiral in this way. Akainu, this matter is approved by Zepha, not to mention Laxus. The 6-style lecture notes provided are already in our hands. If you have anything to say, don't bother me. Sengoku replied in a deep voice. Road. In the face of Akainu's repeated rebuttals, his patience was obviously worn away. Before Akainu could react, the phone bug had already heard a busy tone. Looking at this scene, the admiral who was present suddenly turned ashen, and subconsciously looked at Akainu. Damn old fool. Akainu clenched the phone bug in his hand suddenly. I want to use a guy who doesn't know the details. I just want to see what kind of ability that kid has. All the crew return me to the Navy headquarters within 3 days. The awe-inspiring voice echoed on the deck of the ship. Everyone secretly breathed a sigh of relief, but it was clear that there would still be a turmoil in the future. At the same time, the Great Fairway is windless. At the mouth of the Nine-Snake Island, a huge 2-masted pirate ship set sail. Pulled by 2 sea snakes, they quickly sailed out of the port. The female warrior 9 snakes stationed at the port looked at the graceful body standing proudly on the bow, showing a fanatical expression. Hancock, I didn't expect you to be so easy to agree to the Chihuahua recruitment order from the Navy headquarters. I thought it would take a lot of words to convince you. It seems that you have grown up and are completely sensible. Appeared behind Hancock with a relieved expression. Who let this old woman get on the boat and throw her into the sea to feed the Sea Kings? Hancock turned around and shouted coldly. The violent scene made the mother-in-law's face instantly stiff with relief, and she hurriedly opened her throat and shouted, Hancock, I was blind that day and brought you back to Nine Snake Island. Thought you were grown up, bah. Bastard, Sonia, throw her out for me, don't hinder me from recalling the good times with Lord Chinyu. Hancock glared. Looking at the brand new reward order in his hand, he once again showed the expression of a nympho. Looking at this scene, my mother-in-law finally realized that she would be wrong. Hancock's current appearance, stepping on a horse is an egg on the brain. Mother-in-law, don't blame the elder sister. If it wasn't for the elder sister Chinyu, we would have wasted our time trying to persuade the elder sister to take up the mission. We haven't sailed for 2 years. If we don't accept the call, the world government will send that group. An annoying mid-future, Sonia said with a wry smile. According to my sister's statement, the mission this time is a call from Lord Chinyu. Chapter 590 New Member Target. The call from that kid. Grandma Yi couldn't help but startled. Women who fall into puberty are really scary. That kid made a big fuss in the Chambord Islands. It's too late to hide. Will he still be entangled in such troubles? Although, I don't know how many members of Chihuahua responded this time, but in order to deal with the legendary pirates, the Navy headquarters will definitely come out in full force. If that kid dares to show up, I am afraid that the Navy and Chihuahua will be surrounded and suppressed together. The old voice echoed on the deck of the ship. However, the mother-in-law quickly felt a chill and locked herself on her body. Damn old woman, how dare you despise Lord Chinyu so much, throw her into the sea for me. Hancock shouted angrily. Looking around, showing the hesitant 9 snake warriors, Hancock's face sank. He directly mentioned his mother-in-law, and threw it into the sea. Hancock, you little lie. Why did the mother-in-law screamed, and the whole person flew out? If not, Sonia shot in time to block, and really fell into the sea and fed the Sea Kings. Sister, please forgive your mother-in-law, we will let her keep her mouth shut on the next voyage. Godrew took the lead to plead. Sonia also nodded in agreement. Seeing that the 2 little sisters were also begging for mercy, Hancock snorted coldly and said, Okay, if I talk nonsense to the concubine again, I will really sink you into the sea. After all, the concubine is too beautiful, no matter what you do, will also be forgiven. Quote. Give me the order to leave the windlass belt at full speed. The concubine must meet with Lord Qin Yu as soon as possible. I have already heard his deep call. As the order fell, the female warriors of the 9 snakes mobilized one after another. Looking at Hancock with a frenzied face, watching the brand new reward order in his hand, his mother-in-law snorted coldly and said, I'm a nympho. I think when I was at this age, I was already on my own. What? Lord Qin Yu, hee. On your own. Sonia and Godru subconsciously looked at Granny Za and said, Mother-in-law, we heard that at that time you seemed to be with Raleigh, the underworld king, but you didn't even do it for the Empress of the Amazon and secretly went to sea. At that time, you seemed to be better than your sister. The grown-ups are even crazier. Me and Rayleigh, my mother-in-law couldn't help but froze for a moment, and her bark-like cheeks couldn't help but shouted in a hurried voice. Who said such false words? It was the old man Rayleigh who came to beg me that day. Followed him. Really, at that time in the Chambord Islands, Sister Shachi said you came to the door. Bastard Shachi, dare to slander me. 3 days later, in the unnamed waters hundreds of nautical miles away from Alabasta. A pirate ship is breaking through the waves. There were several familiar figures standing on the huge deck of the ship. Lord Qin Yu, this ancient record pointer does point right in front of you. This island, but is this island really small? Nami looked at the huge island in the distance with disbelief on her face. Looking around, the virgin forests are all over, huge dinosaurs are rampant, roaring and roaring, filling the entire island. According to Nami, this riding horse cannot be called a small garden at all. Calling the world of dinosaurs is not too much. 3 days ago, after Qin Yu resurrected Kay Rockville, he arranged for Basti to stay in Alabasta temporarily, and then asked Nico Robin to look for the small gardens recording our hand. The second island in the original book, where Luffy and the others left Rog Town and crossed the upside-down mountain in order to pursue the Ba Rock Works. Also, it is also where Elbaf, the legendary leader of the giant soldier pirates, and the duel between the Blue Ghost and the Red Ghost. Since Qin Yu wanted to pull people into fairy tale, the 2 giant pirates who had offered a reward of hundreds of millions of bells 100 years ago were undoubtedly the best choice. Qin Yu, didn't you say that you were looking for someone to join fairy tale? K-Rock Doll folded his arms and frowned as he looked at the huge island in front of him. He is active in the first half of the Great Fairway. If Qin Yu hadn't mentioned it, he wouldn't have known that there were such primitive islands in the waters near Alabasta. However, as far as the eye can see, apart from the trees, there is no trace of human beings at all. Not to mention, look for the strong to join fairy tale. Thinking of this, K-Rock Doll couldn't help but said, You won't, you're going to find a dinosaur as a member, it feels like a bit of a loss of identity. Dinosaurs. Qin Yu touched the tip of his nose and said, My next target is indeed not a human being, but the next 2 members are barely special human beings. When you see it, you will definitely say that I have good eyesight. If they learn to be domineering too, I'm afraid even Chihuahai will have to weigh a thing or two. Even Chihuahai weighed 1 or 2. Hearing these words, the people present subconsciously looked at K. Rockville. After all, there is a living target here. Of Rock Doll, they have also witnessed it with their own eyes. Even the existence of Chihuahai, who is also afraid of it, is probably not a nameless person. Feeling the gaze on the boat, K. Rockville's face was a little bit unbearable, and he snorted coldly, Okay, since you said so, President, then I also want to see if they can really make me feel jealous. Hee, K. Rockville, don't worry, there will definitely be surprises. Qin Yu laughed dryly. Let's see where they are first. Observation Haki, dormant in Qin Yu's body, exploded like a frenzy. The next moment, sweeping the entire island. Under the one-button full-level system, Qin Yu's observation Haki has already reached full level, and it is able to foreshadow a glimpse of the possibility of the future. It is not impossible to cover a small garden. With the rapid spread of the coverage area, Chin Yu's closed eyes suddenly opened, frowning, and said, "There are 4 more people than I thought. It seems that someone came to the small garden one step earlier than us." Things got more interesting. Quote, "There are 6 people. Daz was stunned for a moment and asked, "Lord Chin Yu, is this the role of observation hockey?" "Lord K. Rockdale, why don't we also learn a thing or two?" During these 3 days, Daz had thought about learning from Chin Yu's 2-color domineering. After all, apart from him and K. Rockdale, there are only Dusky and Nami on the ship. As for Nico Robin, who was left in Alabasta to temporarily manage the Tomb of Nazarick. It can be said that in the past 3 days, Daz has watched helplessly, and Dasky has gradually become more skilled in the use of domineering. Armament Hockey, who was using it, felt a tingling pain even when his quick-cut fruit gave him a steel-like body during the duel training. According to Daz's calculations, after a while, I am afraid that Dasichi, who is young and like a little girl, will learn to slash iron and stronger flying slash. For Daz, his heart was on fire. Chapter 591-Blue and Red Ghosts. Facing the fiery Daz, Krokdar glanced at Chin Yu's back, snorted coldly, and said, "HMPH, the mere 2-color domineering is nothing special. I have some ideas recently, don't bother the president." Rockdal, who stubbornly refused again as soon as he opened his mouth, Daz's expression froze and his heart became bitter. This may be the last dignity of the strong, and he has to go further and further on the road to death. K. Rockdal's stubbornness to heart, and sometimes begging others to learn from him might as well let him in turn beg himself to be more effective. According to Chin Yu, if you love to learn, you will learn, and if you don't learn, you will fail. After all, the domineering accomplishments in Chin Yu's hands were recounted through the one-click full-level system. There may be no way to 100% re-engraving successfully, but it is definitely much better than blindly groping in this sea. Let's go. Looking at the weather, there will be heavy rain soon. The forest situation in front is unknown. I'll stay to guard the boat. Nami looked up at the still clear sky, and Changbi said with a frown. For this, 3 days ago, K. Rockdal would definitely refute. But along the way, after seeing with his own eyes, Nami's pure prediction, K. Rockdal was also shocked. As a pirate who roamed the sea in the past, especially in the New World, in the seas with unpredictable climate changes, he clearly knows that a transcendent navigator is a rare opportunity for any pirate group. If Nami's accurate prediction ability is released, not to mention the large pirate group, even the Navy will rush for it. It is for this reason that, looking at the huge primitive island in front of him, there is an urgency in K. Rockdal's heart. I was eager to see what the new member's goal that Chin Yu said was enough to make Chiwahai fear. The blank area in the center of the small garden, 2 huge Mukuro bone mountains, and a messy land are a bit shocking. The 2 huge, hill-like bodies, holding weapons, gasped for breath. After finally looking at each other, they suddenly lay on the ground, making a dull rumbling sound, and the dinosaurs and beasts hidden in the virgin forest were scared away. Red Ghost, this time it's 10,800 draws. I will definitely defeat you and become the strongest hero in Elbaf. Green Ghost Dongli with a long beard and a large blade said in a deep voice. Bah, you can't even win against me, and you have the face to say that you are the strongest in Elbaf. That is simply the prestige of our giant pirate group. You have never won a duel in 100 years. Me once. Brokey, the red ghost with a broom-shaped beard, retorted unhappily. As soon as these words fell, the atmosphere that had calmed down a little, suddenly became solemn again. The green ghost's face sank, he propped up his body again, and roared in a hurry, "You dare to question my strength and determination, I will see today how you can defeat me, and start the next duel." Okay, who's afraid of who? Kai Gui roared, and responded directly with a huge axe. However, before they could take action, a figure, from below, landed on Qinggui's shoulders and said, "Two giants, please rest for a while. Sanji has prepared lunch, how about we eat first?" Luffy pressed the straw hat on his head and looked at the two giants who were more than 20 meters tall, with starlight in their eyes. Especially knowing that after they were pirates, they became even more fanatical. A few days ago, Luffy, Sanji and others stole a warship and went to see while Garp held a banquet in Rog Town. Their only purpose was to seek revenge for the Laxus who had never met and sold themselves and others to the Navy headquarters just by talking. It's a pity that as soon as we went out to sea and entered the Upside Down Mountain, everything went smoothly. Once they left Upside Down Mountain, there were only 4 people on the huge warship. An idiot pirate, a lunatic hunter, and the rest are big talkers running on trains, and lecherous chefs with the brains of Haruki. This lineup, let alone looking for enemies. I am afraid that even finding the next destination is more difficult than reaching the sky. The only thing that made them feel fortunate was that the freshwater resources on the boat were consumed at an unprecedented rate, and they came to the small garden by accident. At the same time, he also used food to get acquainted with 2 giant pirates. "Ha ha ha, you kid, you still don't give up, you plan to fool our 2 old guys to leave the small garden and become your crew members. This food alone can't do it, unless you can knock us down at the same time, otherwise then but bullshit." Dongli touched his chest-length beard and laughed heartily. In his eyes, this condition is enough to reject these 4 hairy pirates. However, Tori said that, but when he thought of the food from Sanji's hands. This made the 2 people who had eaten barbecue for hundreds of years couldn't help but glance at each other, and in an instant, their greed defeated the giant's heroic honor and reached a consensus. "Chikui, we have finished our duel today. Obviously, let's continue the next battle," Dongli said solemnly. "What's more, this little ghost has sworn to invite us to a banquet. As the leaders of the giant soldiers pirates, he was born in Elbaf, and he must not lose the etiquette of our giants. Quote. Don't you have some fruit wine there? Get some. HMPH, you also have Guo, Chan there, so get some too. For the sake of Elbaf's giant etiquette, let's go here today." Kai Gui snorted coldly, but hurriedly responded. However, as soon as the 2 turned around, their expressions suddenly changed, and they started drinking in unison. "Little devil, hurry up and get off my shoulders, someone is fast approaching here." After 100 years of fighting, the Green Ghost and the Red Ghost are already familiar with this island. What's more, the battle also kept their physical functions at their peak level and keen hearing, but they further touched the threshold of observation haki. It's a pity that they are old guys from 100 years ago, and this kind of intuition can only be done before encountering an indescribable crisis. In the moment just now, the 2 of them felt a tyrannical aura locked on their bodies. That feeling, though instantly disappeared without a trace. However, it still made their spines chill. As the strongest of the former giant soldier pirates, someone who can make them react like this. That is by no means ordinary. Someone is here, why can't I see it? Luffy didn't land immediately. Instead, he lifted the brim of his hat and looked around. However, before they could react, an unexpected voice sounded on Qinggui's shoulders. "Sorry for the sudden visit to disturb you all, but it's a surprise to see unexpected faces." Chapter 592 The Taste of the Iron Fist of Love. Dongli and Broki's expressions changed drastically. He hurriedly followed the voice, and caught sight of Chinyu who had used the Laxus character template. "You, who are you, and why are you here?" Dongli asked eagerly. In their perception, the reminder was just because they felt that someone was approaching fast in the forest. The perceived target was not Chinyu on his shoulders at all. However, before they could react, a deep voice sounded again. "Arrived." Endless yellow sand swept through the forest. In the end, the figure of K. Rockville was condensed on the open ground. Immediately after that, it was Daz, who went on a rampage and broke down a large number of trees. The two of them had been chasing Chin Yu's pace just now. It's a pity that compared to Chin Yu, who displayed lightning, their speed was still so fast that they couldn't even see the taillights of the car. When they stood firm and looked up to find Chin Yu's trace, the sight of the scene made their pupils shrink. Dozens of meters huge, like a hill-like body. Yuan stared at the two giant figures with ox-like eyes, and the expressions of Krokdar and Daz changed drastically. Originally, in their eyes, they were still pondering that it would be good for Chin Yu to go to such a remote place and get two good dinosaurs. It never occurred to me that two giants would appear here. What's more, these two giants seem to be much older than they have seen in the past. Let me introduce to you, this is the goal of my trip. 100 years ago, I was offered a reward of over 100 million yuan from the giant soldiers pirates, the former head of the group, Qingui Dongli and Chigi Braki. Chin Yu patted it. Tori's helmet, said with a smile. Giants have lifespans that far exceed normal human beings. It is not bad that ordinary people can live to 70 or 80 years old. But giants have a lifespan of 300 years. 100 years of duel, for Dongli and Brokey, they just missed a puberty. If it is said that Dongli and Brokey 100 years ago were young men like the new giant pirates in the original book, Helding. Then, after 100 years of fighting to the death, Dongli and Brokey can definitely be called in their prime. Long battles, physical fitness and strength, all belong to the peak level. Looking at the giants, I am afraid that the previous leaders of the giant soldiers pirates, Yaruru the Mountain Beard and Yoruru the Waterfall Beard, cannot be compared with them. If it is said that people who can be called heroes of Elbath, at least need to learn the Spear of Heroes, then the Green Ghost and the Red Ghost have a higher level of hegemony. That is even one of the four emperors, and Charlotte Lingling also regards it as the trump card of the trump card. 100 years ago, there was a reward of over 100 million. Daz's expression changed dramatically. Looking at the two huge bodies, his face was full of disbelief. As for the concept of Bailey, Daz, as a bounty hunter, is very clear. Above this sea, he also has an inflationary financial order. Decades ago, the legendary great pirate, such as the world destroyer Bondewald, was only offered a reward of 200 million. This amount, placed on the sea at that time, was astounding. It is a symbol of the strong. Until Roger, the Pirate King, opened the era of the great pirates. Up to now, the pirates of the New World, with a reward of over 100 million, are everywhere. To be able to mix up the reward to hundreds of millions 100 years ago is shocking. Yuhi, who stood shoulder to shoulder with Roger, Golden Lion and others, and Brooke, who admired him, also offered a reward of more than 30 million. Now, as soon as Chin Yu made his move, he dug out two living fossils with a reward of over 100 million. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, who would want to believe that this kind of terrifying existence still exists in the world? If you can really earn income, for fairy tale, the strength will definitely skyrocket. However, thinking of this big man, if you want to leave the small garden, I'm afraid it's a bit difficult. Who are you guys who dare to snatch my crew? Luffy took the lead. His hands suddenly stretched back and shot straight. Rubber bazooka. Sanji and Zoro, who were cooking food below, were also shocked by the scene in front of them. However, when they saw clearly the figure standing on Dongli's shoulders, their expressions changed drastically. Luffy, run away. Escape. Luffy was stunned for a moment. For him, this move has been used since childhood, and it is a tried and true combat technique. Through the extension of the rubber, the power of boxing can be exerted to the limit. However, this idea just sprouted in Luffy's mind, and the next moment, the sight of his eyes made his pupils shrink. Boom! A dull crash resounded. Like a rocket, the fist that shot out just appeared in front of Chinyu. In an instant, he was clasped above his fist with one hand. Before long, Luffy reacted, and his right hand suddenly pulled with force. Luffy went straight towards Chinyu and swept away violently. "You idiot, I'm a rubber guy. You can't hurt me with your bare hands." Luffy woke up suddenly and said with a big laugh. "Try my rubber chimes." With the voice, Luffy's head flew backwards again. In the body, just approaching Chinyu's 3 meters away, the rubber neck of Ultimate was tensed and stopped abruptly. Toward Chinyu broke the air strike. The awe-inspiring sonic boom reverberated in all directions. Looking at Luffy, who was so fierce, and he was desperate for Saburo's posture, Zoro and Sanji also tensed up. A hand clenched the handle of the knife, and the toe of a right foot pressed the soil on the ground. As long as Luffy succeeds in one hit, they will inevitably rise up and launch a deadly combined attack on Chinyu. However, this idea just came into being, and what caught the eye was the kind and cruel smile on Chinyu's face. "I'm sorry to give you a taste of the iron fist of love." Hum. The 5 fingers were suddenly clenched, and the pitch-black armament Haki quickly covered Chinyu's fist. Looking at this scene, K-Roctal and Daz's cheeks twitched. They were surprised that Luffy was a rubber devil fruit. But looking at Luffy now, thinking that he has the power of devil fruit, he looks like he is invincible in the world. Even in Chinyu's hands, Armament Haki's posture is completely unknown. That look is so similar to them a week ago. Seeing Luffy approaching Chinyu in an instant, like a bell, tearing apart the air and attacking Luffy. Daz and Rockdale believe that this blow will leave a deep and indelible impression on Luffy. Flower Sakura Fist Gun. Boom. With a punch, Luffy's head sank in an instant. Under the venting of the huge impact, it directly made him doubt his life. Chapter 593_Elbaf has no weak. Boom. The dull thunder-like collision sound suddenly echoed. The huge impact force was released, making Luffy instantly stunned. Under the foam at the mouth, his eyes turned white, and his whole body flew out like a cannonball. Mukuro Bone Mountain behind him in a blink of an eye. Boom. The mountain-like Mukuro bone was directly smashed and 2 huge ribs were broken, and one end was stuck deep in the Mukuro Bone Mountain. The violent scene made Zoro and Sanji's faces change dramatically. During this period of time, they clearly knew that Luffy's rubber fruit was immune to physical blunt weapon attacks. It was only under the fist of his grandfather, the naval hero Garp, that he was hit head-on. "You all appeared here. It seems that you slipped out under the eyes of Old Man Garp." Chinyu looked at Zoro and Sanji. "Looking at your posture, you should come to me to seek revenge, one by one, or together." Chinyu was indeed surprised that Luffy and his party appeared here. However, as he said, it was definitely thanks to Garp that the 4 of them could come together. "Sure enough, it was you. Let the old man take us away by force. Today I'll see how capable you are." Sanji's face sank, and his anger rose up. Originally, he was in the restaurant on the sea, in front of a gentleman, fishing for big beautiful girls. Freehand life with time to talk shit. I never thought that one day I would be punched to the ground by a violent old man. No matter whether he calls his father or mother or grandpa, he can't stop him at all. What's more, it was slaughtered in front of many beauties. Thinking of this, Sanji's heart was filled with anger. "Green algae head, let's do it together, don't hold back." "Sex Kappa, it should be you." The 2 looked at each other cursingly. However, under this kind of action, more of the violence erupted unexpectedly. Boom. 2 dull treads sounded suddenly. Like cannonballs, the 2 jumped straight to the ground. The speed was so fast that he arrived in the blink of an eye, and Chin Yu, who was standing on Dongli's shoulders, formed a posture like a pincer attack. 3 swords, tigers. Bone meat and meat skewers. The 2 violent shouts rose in response, and the fierce and unparalleled attacks slashed towards Chin Yu one after the other. Not bad momentum and speed, but can it catch up with thunder and lightning? Chin Yu smiled warmly. The magic of thunder and lightning waves. When the golden magic circle burst out suddenly under Chin Yu's feet. Boom! The violent thunder exploded instantly like a horned dragon. With a speed as fast as thunder, it slashed down from the 9 heavens. The speed was so fast, before Sanji and Zoro could react. In an instant, the 2 of them were enveloped in it. Boom! Dull like thunder, it rolled away. The violent blow made Sanji and Zoro freeze as if they were in midair, and even the attack in their hands suddenly became stiff. With black smoke all over his body, he opened his mouth, flipped over Byakugan, and fell directly to the back. Boom! The sound of heavy objects falling to the ground echoed on the huge battlefield. As soon as Chin Yu made his move, he immediately dealt with the 3 of Luffy. Usopp, who was still standing in the distance, akimbo intending to forcefully pretend to be forced once, trembled in his feet and stomach in an instant. When he met Chin Yu's sight, he knelt directly on the ground and shivered. Like that, I am afraid that Chin Yu will stare at him again, and he will kneel on the ground and call his father. Little devil, you dare to hurt my friend, Dongli said in a deep voice. Those eyes that stared into Bull's eyes were locked tightly on Chin Yu's body. The scene just now seemed very complicated. However, if you really count it, the time before and after is only a few dozen seconds. By the time they reacted, the battle was over. Looking at the same slender youth, Dongli and Brokey, for the first time showed a solemn expression. At least, in their eyes, this person is definitely not comparable to Luffy and the others. Haha, Dongli, Brokey, you don't need to be so wary of me. Chin Yu patted Dongli's helmet, and the lightning flashed on his body, displaying lightning and falling on the open space dozens of meters away. Don't worry, this time I'm here to recruit you to join Fairy Tail. Recruit us. Dongli and Brokey were stunned for a moment, then looked at each other and laughed loudly. Yohaha, Brokey, did I hear it wrong? This brat has the idea of being the strongest in the giant clan. As the heroes of Elbaf, when will we be inferior to others? Boy, you have made a mistake. I advise you to come from there and go back there. Don't hinder our duel. Otherwise, don't blame us. We will do it to you. The wrath of giants can destroy the country. The rolling voice, like thunder, echoed between the heavens and the earth, and there was no way to disperse it for a long time. Brokey didn't answer Dongli's words. But the disdain on his face was completely permeated on his face, and he did not hide it at all. In the eyes of them who have lived for more than 100 years, no matter what Chin Yu's strength is, he is like a hairy child. Haha, do you still have the face? Do you call yourself the giant hero of Elbaf? Chin Yu laughed dryly, picked up a piece of meat beside him, and said, hid in the small garden, duel for 100 years, and there is no separation. Victory or defeat, that's a show of brains. Elbaf has been destroyed for decades, Yorulu and Yalulu have been killed, and the murderers are now at large. Your giants have already fallen, and you are still here looking forward to what happened 100 years ago. Honor. If you have to be held accountable, you are the culprit. Elbaf was destroyed, and you are half responsible. The slightly elusive voice reverberated in the sky for a long time and could not be dissipated. Sand Crocodile, Rock Doll and Daz's expressions suddenly became solemn. Lord Chin Yu, didn't he intend to anger these 2 legendary giants? Daz said with a livid expression. K. Rockdale nodded silently and said, wait a while and be careful, the giants go mad, but not ordinary people can stop them. As he said that, K. Rockdale secretly took a few steps back and gave Chin Yu the home court. If he hadn't been beheaded by Chin-yu, Crocodile would think Chin-yu was a lunatic for such a move. But after trying to die, Crocodile knew very well that as long as the boy in front of him decided to do it, no matter how reluctant the two giants are, they will eventually board this pirate ship. It feels like a real fragrance. Bastard brat, you dare to insult and slander the homeland of our giants, Elbaf. We Elbaf have no weaklings, there is absolutely no chance that the two elders will be killed. Chapter 594 Let the giant fly for a while. The roar rolled away like thunder, with a deafening smell. Under Dongli's glaring eyes, his huge hand like a mountain suddenly clenched tightly. The 5 fingers made a crackling sound of bones, and without any fancy, they smashed towards Chin-yu head-on. Boom! With a punch, the air in the whole world seemed to be stirred by an invisible big hand. Everywhere along the way, the wind swept under the waves. With a rolling gesture, King Kong headed towards Chin-yu. The violent scene made Sauron and others wake up. Seeing the giant's furious, majestic gesture, the faces of the 4 of them instantly turned ashen. All eyes turned and locked on Chin-yu's body. They eagerly wanted to know how to deal with the mighty Chin-yu just now in the face of the power of the giant. The momentum is good, but hiding in the small garden for 100 years is really out of touch with history. The sea now is not the world of giants. Chin-yu raised his head suddenly, his face still indifferent. The pitch-black armament hockey rolled back like a frenzy, instantly entering the armament hockey of the whole body. The next moment, without any bells and whistles, towards the fist that rolled like a hill, it was a blow in the face. Boom! The dull collision sound exploded like thunder. Under the collision of unrepentant and conceited, the fists whose body size was like a gap broke out in an instant. There was a brief silence in the whole world. Immediately, a thunderous sonic boom erupted. The rolling air waves brought the feeling of a Category 12 hurricane passing through. Everywhere along the way, rocks flew and rolled over, and huge trees were broken in the middle. At this moment, it feels like the end of the world. After everything recovered, the center of the collision between the two appeared under a crack of the earth, as if overwhelmed, and a crack like a spider web spread out. When they saw clearly, under the huge fist, the thin figure was still unscathed. At this moment, as if in a dream, he couldn't help rubbing his eyes. Oh my God, what did I see? He actually blocked the giant's attack. Usopp was shaking all over. Talking tongues or stammering. Originally, in his eyes, the wrath of giants could definitely destroy mountains and land. Based on his size, he should be able to crush Chin-yu. However, the scene that came into view now completely subverted their cognition. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, who would believe that under the blow of the giant's anger, there is still popularity standing there calmly? No way, who are you? Broki's face sank, and he roared in a hurry. As an old opponent who had been fighting for hundreds of years, Broki knew exactly how powerful Dongli was in his heyday. If he was a little careless, he might also be smashed into the air with one blow. Right now, it's being downplayed. Still a little devil with a very different size. The huge gap between the front and back has subverted their cognition. Hee, who are you asking me? Chin-yu laughed dryly and said, I am your future captain and your hope for revenge. So, those little devils, you should hide away, the warm-up should be over. Finished warming up. The people present were stunned. Even Daz and Crocodile's expressions couldn't help changing. However, before they could react, Chin-yu moved. Raiden Thunder Style, Chakra Mode. Lightning Clothes. Boom. The violent thunder light instantly detonated on Chin-yu's body. The moment Huo Ran raised his head, he stepped out in front of everyone's eyes. Whoosh. Like a thunderous gesture, he disappeared in front of everyone out of thin air. When he reacted, he took the lead and appeared in front of Dongli's chest. At this moment, Chinyu was like a god bathed in thunder, his muscles bulging like a rock. The pitch-black armament haki is blended on the muscle cells activated by lightning, enhancing the limit of physical activation. One after another mysterious black-gold lightning patterns spread rapidly on Chinyu's body. It gives people the feeling that it has a strange posture like opening 4 blocks in the original book. The height that was originally more than 2 meters suddenly increased by tens of centimeters, giving people the feeling of being reborn. The aura emanating from it makes the air circulating around it distorted. The violent scene made Daz's face turn pale all of a sudden, and he hurriedly looked at K-Roctal. When he entered his eyes, his face was also pale, and his muttered words were like an invisible heavy hammer, beating people's nerves. It turns out that when he fought me, he didn't use all his strength. Looking at Chinyu, who seemed to have changed a person, let alone K-Roctal, even Daz thought about it with his toes, and he was able to come up with this result. I thought it would take a lot of effort for Chinyu to kill Chiwahai. Now it seems that all riding on a horse is wishful thinking. 6 forms of profound truth. Valkyrie Rampage Body. Ryu Sakura Thor's biggest wheel. The deep voice spit out from Chinyu's mouth. Without any bells and whistles, the 5 fingers of the right hand were suddenly clenched, and they were gently lowered towards Dongli's chest. The next moment, before everyone in the field reacted, the power dormant in Chinyu's body exploded like thunder. Boom! The violent impact, like a raging tide, took a rolling gesture and rushed straight to Dongli's chest. Feeling this overwhelming force, Dongli's face changed drastically. Before I could think about it, the sharp pain in my chest brought a heart-piercing taste. The black gold power flow poured out on him in a galloping posture. Boom! At this moment, the huge body flew out like a sandbag. The speed is so fast that everyone just feels a flower in front of them. The gust of wind cut through the sky like a raging wave. With a rolling posture, he slammed his head on the huge Mukuro Bone mountain thousands of meters away. The huge impact made this mountain, which had been preserved for hundreds of years, as Dongli's temporary home, shattered. The blood spit out from the mouth, splashed down like a downpour. The huge island shook violently. It felt like a giant turning over. The violent scene shook everyone's nerves. Especially the 4 of Sauron. Their pupils were as big as bull's eyes. Looking at the scene in front of them, they couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. It's unbelievable. In their perception, the person who fought against a giant like a hill and was smashed into the air should be Chinyu. However, the scene in front of him has been subverted. Blue Oni Tori, who talks about Elbath's strongest. The dignified giant was smashed into the air by a punch, if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. Who wants to believe that this scene is real? And at this distance, stepping on a horse is to let the giant fly for a while. Chapter 595. It's finally here. You bastard, if you dare to hurt Dongli, kill me. Broki growled angrily. The axe that was dancing in his hand made a stern sound of breaking the air, and slashed head-on towards Chinyu. The speed is so fast, it is approaching in the blink of an eye. The violent scene shook everyone's nerves. They eagerly wanted to see how Chinyu would respond to the powerful and incomparable blow of the giant. But, at the moment of entry, it made their pupils shrink suddenly. Chinyu suddenly raised his head and looked at the huge axe that was slashed by force. Without any bells and whistles, the 5 fingers suddenly lifted. The axe that was slashed in the sky was directly caught. Boom! The dull collision sound resounded suddenly. The rolling air waves overturned, and the hurricane it brought up was like a 10th level hurricane. The ground under his feet was even more shattered. Facing all this, Chinyu, who was under attack, only took a half step back. Thunder Dragon Slayer Magic, Thunder Dragon's Claw. Boom. The 5 fingers of Qin Yu's right hand suddenly clasped together. The endless stream of cherry blossoms, mixed with the power of violent thunder, exploded in an instant. The seemingly indestructible thick axe was shattered at this moment, like a piece of paper. Under the rapid spread of the cobweb crack, the black gold thunder light, like a horned dragon, went straight to Brokey. What? The violent thunder light instantly enveloped Brokey's huge body directly. Under the screams, Qin Yu, who was standing in the same place, has turned into a thunder light, and he took the lead and appeared in front of him. Under the frantic compression of the endless thunder light in the right hand, there is no trace of fancy. He slammed into Brokey head-on. Thunder Dragon Slayer Magic Thunder Dragon's Collapse Fist. Boom. One punch. Like a violent thunder light venting, the air is rapidly distorted wherever it passes. Under the rolling of endless thunder, it is even more powerful, pouring out. Boom. A thunderous explosion sounded, and Brokey's huge body flew upside down like a cannonball. The speed is faster than that of Qing Gui Dongli. The violent blow shook everyone's nerves. Wherever the huge body passed, the trees along the way were directly shattered. The blood that was spitting out from the mouth also stained the ground along Yuhi's way. In the end, it smashed into the virgin forest near the coast, thousands of meters away. Boom. The entire land was shaken by a huge earthquake, and the wind and waves that were set off were like a 10th-level hurricane, rapidly rolling back away. Under the large sand and dust, many dinosaurs and beasts hiding in the jungle fled in panic. It can be said that looking at these 2 island overlords who have ruled the small garden for hundreds of years, fear has already been implanted in their minds. In a split second, he was knocked into the air like a broken sandbag. For the original inhabitants of this island, the cognitive subversion is also a nightmare. Some dinosaurs and beasts that could not be avoided were instantly smashed into flesh-chan. Under the splash of blood, it directly dyed Yuhi's entire estuary. Sauron and the others who witnessed this scene stiffened. When I thought of not long ago, I still wanted to join forces to defeat Qin Yu, and my spine was still chilling. If the fight just now, Qin Yu really got serious. That awaits them, it will be a nightmare. Looks like that big guy can't hold back a bit. Qin Yu raised his brows and smiled genially. Sauron, lend me the word Hidao. The inexplicable words made the people in the field startled. Even on Mukuro Bone Mountain, Tori who climbed up was no exception. Lend a knife. Why did I lend it to you? Zoro was startled. Shut up, you green algae head. It's your business if you want to die, hurry up and give me the knife. With Sanji's voice, he kicked him in the face. The ancient words of Hidao flew out. It fell directly into Qin Yu's hands. Looking at the void and standing, bathed in thunder light, Qin Yu looked like a god. The moment he held the word Daoyi in his hand, the whole person's momentum changed. If it is said that the moment before, Qin Yu gave them to be arrogant and domineering, then the current Qin Yu gave them the feeling that he was as sharp as a sharp blade. With him as the center, the circulating air has a hint of stagnation. The moment Huo Ran raised his head, a roaring crashing sound of waves broke out on the shoal coast at the mouth of the sea in the distance. Dongli, who hurriedly got up, suddenly changed his expression. Looking at Brokey, who was still lying near the estuary, he roared in a hurry. Brokey, run away, that guy is here. For hundreds of years, in addition to the decisive battle, they have another way to decide the winner. It is determined by the size of the prey being hunted. The target of the hunt is the island-eating beast that exists in the waters near the small garden. However, for hundreds of years, while they were hunting the island-eating beasts, the island-eating beasts were also hunting them. Right now, Brokey was not only injured, but also happened to fall in the direction of the estuary. This undoubtedly allowed the island-eating beasts lurking in the sea to see an opportunity to hunt. Boom! The dull sound of the impact of water waves echoed suddenly. It was as huge as a small island, with a body as large as 1,000 meters, and it broke out of the water directly. The large puff of seawater it brought up poured down like a torrential rain. The huge body, when galloping in the air, gives people a feeling of covering the sky and the sun. A pair of lantern-like eyes suddenly turned and locked on Brokey. The bloody mouth opened wide, and the stench brought by it, and the huge amplitude, was enough to swallow a small island directly into the belly. The violent scene shook everyone's nerves. Even Brokey, who was lying on the ground, was full of disbelief. However, the thunderbolt that Chinyu had just cast, he was able to take it down. Under the click, the body was briefly paralyzed. Facing the behemoth in front of him, he couldn't make a move for a moment or three to block and dodge. The only thing to do is to watch death come. Brokey, be careful, I'll save you now. Dongli growled in a hurry. He was dueling Brokey for hundreds of years. However, facing this old partner in front of him, he was in deep crisis. The hatred of the past has long since vanished. What he desperately wanted to do now was to free Brokey. Good come. I've cut through iron, I've cut through steel, but I haven't cut through islands yet. Chinyu smiled genially. The inexplicable speech made people stunned. In the next moment, there is no waiting for them to react. Lei Guang and Lu Ying, who were dormant in Chinyu's hands, frantically poured into the words of Hidao as if they didn't want money. At the moment when the blade chirped cheerfully and was covered by the pitch-black armament haki, the ancient words of Hidao seemed to be transforming. Falling in Zoro's eyes, a ridiculous thought flashed in his mind. Chapter 596 Split the Sky. Black Knife. Sauron looked at Chinyu's hand, and his appearance completely subverted the image of Hidao. A word from Guina's mouth flashed in his mind. Every swordsman dreams of owning a black sword. Originally, for young Zoro, he didn't know what a black knife was. At least, in his eyes, isn't the blade without black. However, with the growth of age, Guina passed away inexplicably. Let Sauron follow the footsteps of Black Blade even more. Until the scene in front of him appeared, when Zoro's mind roared, an extremely absurd thought flashed. The black sword not only represents the famous sword, but also represents the realm of the swordsman. He finally understood why this young man of the same age as him gave him two valuable swords. That's because any blade that falls into his hands will transform into a famous sword. Chaotic thoughts flashed through Zoro's mind. The moment Chinyu raised his head suddenly, his eyes were like hawks, and he was locked on the island-eating beast that rushed up into the sky. The fierce chi machine that had been madly accumulated in his body, at this moment, exploded like a dike burst. While stirring the air in the four directions of the sky, Chinyu moved. Black Knife, 1 knife flow, Thunder Shadow flow 10 burials. Jung. The sound of the sword chirping was like the roar of a horned dragon, rising straight into the sky of the 9 heavens. The endless thunder light blooms, and it is crazily intertwined with the fierce and incomparable Lu Ying. Turned into a training, straight into the void. Hit the sky. It is like a thunder dragon soaring into the sky, smashing everything in the sky with a posture like tearing the sky and the earth. The violent air waves turned into a Category 12 hurricane and swept the entire island. In an instant, cold air rushed out of everyone's spine, giving people the illusion of falling into the ice cellar. Everyone just felt that between heaven and earth, all the places within sight were occupied by the dazzling golden light. Roar. The deafening scream and roar sounded without warning. With a tingling sensation like tearing the eardrum, it echoed in the heaven and the earth for a long time and could not be dissipated. Before everyone could react, the hot liquid poured down like a downpour. The fishy smell went straight into the nostrils. The violent scene shook everyone's nerves. Before they could think about it, everyone rubbed their eyes frantically, looking up to see what was going on in the sky. However, the dazzling golden light was dissipating in the scene, and it was as huge as a small island, with a body as large as 1,000 meters, and it was cut in half. Large swaths of blood poured down from the neatly broken mouth. Through the area of half of the body, the moment he saw the sky, his pupils contracted. My eyes almost burst. This knife not only severed the island-eating beast in two. The sky was also split open. Boom! The two halves of the huge body, under the control of the island-eating beast, bounced weakly in the void. Immediately, under the watchful eyes of the public, it crashed onto the island. The kilometer-huge body gives the impression that it is like a huge mountain range, making the entire small garden vibrate violently. Looking at this astonishing scene in front of me, and the bloody smell in the air, not only Sauron and the others, but even the two giants couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. Over the years, they have also tried to challenge this huge island-eating beast. Not to mention the one-on-one situation, though. In the original book, Tori and Brokey are going to send Luffy and his party out of the small garden. Displaying the combined technique to dominate the country, it just knocked it into the air. There is absolutely no way to kill them. Of course, among them, their weapons, after 100 years, have long been overwhelmed, unable to withstand their full blow. However, in terms of the maximum numerical value, Dongli and Brokey, who could achieve the greatest result, were only severely injured by the island-eating beast. To achieve the same record as Chin-Yu is completely a dream. If this shot falls on them, I am afraid that the end and the island-eating beast will not be much better. Is this knocking the mountain and shaking the tiger? Messy thoughts flashed in the minds of the two giants. He hurriedly looked at Chin-Yu and met his gaze. However, this time, Dongli and Brokey, the arrogance of the giants, disappeared in an instant. Okay, the island-eating beast has also been killed, and the warm-up has been completed. Then, let's continue the duel just now. Chin-Yu said with a smile. Now, I'll give you two choices. 1. Like the island-eating beast, it was split in half by me. 2. Join Fairy Tail and become my companion. I can give you the power to restore the glory of Elbaf Giant. For example, the high-level domineering Chi Sakura that I just cast. The deep voice, at this moment, seemed to be infused with a magic sound, and there was no way to disperse it for a long time. Everyone's eyes were locked on the two giants. They eagerly wanted to know, compared with Chin-Yu's resolute behavior, whether the proud head of the giant can still be raised. As the words dissipated, the huge situation suddenly fell into an inexplicable silence. Feeling the urgent gaze around him, Dongli couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. After looking at Brokey, they spoke in unison. I, Dongli Brokey, are willing to join Fairy Tail, and I hope the captain can give us the power to restore Elbaf, the giant's glory. The voices like waves gathered together and echoed over the entire island, and there was no way to disperse for a long time. Looking at the two legendary giants, an instant consensus was reached. Except for Zoro and others who stared blankly, even the face of the sand crocodile rock doll suddenly turned blue. He had thought that Chin-Yu would force the two giants to join Fairy Tail. It was as if he was persuaded to join that day. However, Jean Rockdoll never imagined that this process would end so quickly. What's more, looking at the expressions of these two giants, I was completely convinced. In particular, the slash that split the heavens and the earth just now made K. Rockdoll feel an inexplicable heartbeat. Originally, in K. Rockdoll's eyes, domineering is only a weak one, and it is a small path to enhance strength that will only be chosen when there is no powerful devil fruit ability. No matter how you practice, it is absolutely impossible to match his natural devil fruit. However, Chin Yu's physical skills, domineering, and fruit power are now combined. Completely subverted K-Rockthal's cognition. If you replace the island eater that flew across the sky just now, it's him. Rockdale believes that he has obtained results with the help of rustling fruit. Apart from the fact that the corpse is not as big as the island eater, the so-called fate is no different. And there was a hint of eagerness in K-Rockthal's arrogant heart. Chapter 597 The Rhythm of Being a Nurse. Uncle Dongli, you joined him like this. Luffy couldn't help but rushed out of the ruins. During this time, they joined their queue in order to kidnap two giants, but they were both fathers and mothers. In addition to spending a lot of lips and tongues, there are also a lot of food and drinks. Those were all things that came through from Garp. However, it looked like it might be successful. I never thought that Cheng Yaojin would be killed in the middle. In just a few minutes, their efforts of several days were completely overturned in vain. Haha, you kid, we didn't plan to get on your boat from the beginning. Dongli sat on the ground. For Chin Yu's attack just now, it didn't hurt their internal organs, but it also hurt their bones and muscles. When he spoke, his body still hurt. This is one of the reasons why they surrendered. When he was in his prime, he couldn't do Chin Yu. Now that he is injured, he has to go up and do it. That would be death at all. You giants really have no backbone. Looking at the two giants, he directly denied his fantasy, and Luffy stuttered. Dongli obviously didn't take Luffy's words to heart. He laughed with the giant sword in his hand, put it aside, raised his head and took a sip of wine, saying, "You're really a brat, no wonder your grandfather doesn't let you be a pirate." The crisis in this sea is not something you can imagine. The weak eat the strong, but the rule of the strong in this sea, if this time, the person you meet is not him. If he didn't show mercy, then you should be like the island-eating beast, you should become two corpses, display them in the small garden, and finally turn them into a cup of lotus. The voice of Cheng's words reverberated in the sky in all directions, like a magic sound, and there was no way to disperse it for a long time. It is like an invisible hammer, hitting the depths of their souls. Not to mention Luffy, even Zoro and others couldn't refute them, and their expressions became ashen. Haha, it looks like you guys are also aware of the seriousness of the problem. Broky strode over, and after laughing, he also sat down. Your strength is quite good, but I still want to persuade one or two. This sea is not suitable for you for the time being. If you can, I hope that after you leave the small garden, you can contact your grandfather and rush into the great waterway. It is still too reluctant for you now. What's more, Dongli and I, as giants, the most respected are the strong, the head of Laxus, but with our strength, we have convinced the giants. Having said that, Broky glanced at the island eater with lingering fears and continued. What's more, what he said is not wrong. As the strongest giant warriors 100 years ago, not only did we not think about protecting Elbaf, but we hid here willfully to carry out the so-called ignorant duel, which led to Elbaf is destroyed. Our giants are out of glory. We need strength to restore the glory of the giant Elbaf, but we, who are out of touch with the history of 100 years, need a guide even more, otherwise we will only take more detours. The rolling voices, like thunder, echoed in this world. Whether it was Zoro or Sanji, even K-Rockthal's face was very embarrassed. Before they set foot in the sea, they were still pretentious with their strength. But after seeing Chin Yu's strength with his own eyes. This is undoubtedly the ruthless comparison between Yingguang and Haoyu. In particular, Rock Doll, who not long ago, was hiding in Alabasta as a hero. Just like these two legendary giants. Okay, you guys have suffered a lot, so let's get some treatment first. Chin Yu grabbed the scepter with his right hand, and instantly dropped the scepter into his hand. Now the templates of Laxus and Bone King are more than 60% realistic, so some power and means can still be borrowed. Tier 4 Magic, Group Therapy. Boom. With the scepter in his hand, he stomped on the ground, and the huge magic power was vented, and the magic circle was instantly built. Healing light and rain fell from the sky, giving people a pleasant feeling that all the cells in the body were breathing. The tingling sensation that had spread all over the body receded quickly. Haha, I didn't expect our new captain to have such a strange power. Dongli laughed heartily. Brocky, it seems that our choice this time is not wrong. Yes, we are the strongest giants in Elbaf, of course we will not choose wrong. Brocky also laughed. For a while, the rolling laughter was like a muffled thunder, and the shock made people's ears tingle. Chinyu reluctantly dug out the earwax that came out from the shock, thinking about whether to control the giant's volume in the future. The next moment, the call of the phone bug rang suddenly. Mosamoxi, teacher, I'm Bastius. Bastius. Chinyu raised his brows involuntarily. He remembered that Bastius was dealing with the mess in Alabasta. He is also the only person in his team who does not know his dual identity. Is it because you see through your identity? Messy thoughts flashed in his mind. Chinyu made a gesture to Dongli and Brocky, signaled to keep silent, and then connected to the phone bug. Bastiu, I'm Laxus, is there anything important? Teacher, I'm sorry to disturb you at this time. It's because the students are embarrassed. It's just that when I met Mr. Karp just now, he said that the person you recommended seems to have slipped away under Mr. Karp's eyes to seek revenge on you. If you meet him, please be merciful. Inside the phone bug, Bastia's hurried voice could be heard. Chinyu raised his brows, looked at the stiff-looking Zoro and said, Tell Mr. Garp, I have caught the man, and I will send it to him later. What? Where did those boys really go? I have to abolish him today. Karp's voice came suddenly. In this sudden scene, even Sanji and Zoro couldn't help but slap their wrists, and the things they were holding were scattered all over the floor. Looking at the way they shook their heads desperately, it was obvious that they cast a shadow on Garp's iron fist. Chinyu rolled their eyes at them and said, Mr. Karp, calm down, man, I'll send it to you. But if they don't want to, there's nothing I can do. Hearing these words, Zoro and the others were suddenly relieved. Laxus, you, Karp suddenly became angry. However, after a short pause, a sentence came out that caught Chinyu off guard. Boy, I heard that Sengoku and Zephyr both praised you for having a set of theories for training newcomers. Why don't you help the old man and train these little devils? If the effect is good, you may be able to take Zephyr's old face off. Let me teach them. Chinyu was stunned for a moment and looked at the four of Sauron. Isn't this the rhythm of being a nanny? Chapter 598 I am just a teacher. Chapter 598 Hokage _ Teacher, you can consider Mr. Karp's proposal. Teacher Zephyr and Marshal Sengoku have already made a decision. As long as the teacher nods, they are willing to let the teacher become the new instructor of the naval boot camp. Bastiu said anxiously, New instructor. Chinyu couldn't help but be startled. The decision of Sengoku and Zephyr was unexpected. Originally, I just thought that the one-button full-level system and the 6 style use notes can be stirred up a little, the Navy headquarters. Give him a leverage to create a point of world turmoil in the later stage. It never occurred to me that Sengoku and Zephyr would also pay attention. It even threw out the olive branch of the instructors of the Navy boot camp. This is a position comparable to a rear admiral or even a lieutenant admiral. After all, to be able to teach in a naval boot camp is not a seasoned person. To convince a group of unruly newcomers, at least the fist needs to be big enough. Zephyr can become the chief instructor, making all the newcomers, and even the current Navy generals in awe. That is also the halo of his former general. What's more, the Navy boot camp, which is the cradle of newcomers from the Navy headquarters in exchange for blood. Now, a person who doesn't know the origin is actually allowed to take an exceptional position as an instructor. This is enough to prove that the 6-type application method obtained in the system is far more attractive than his cognition. Bastiou, don't get in the way of the old man's words. Cap shouted, obviously snatching the phone bug away. You give me a good training for these guys along the way. The old man got an emergency order to assist the Akainu guy and encircle Walder. As long as you let my grandson improve his strength, and later go to the Navy headquarters, this old man will cover you. Abandoning these words, the other part of the phone bug was immediately hung up. This kind of energy that comes and goes in the rain is really hard to turn around. However, the only thing Chin Yu cared about was that the Navy began to encircle Wald. In his memory, Wald in the original book, in order to prove his strength, chose to use Chiwahai as a meat shield. It's a pity that in the end, only Hancock's 2 sisters were obtained, and the so-called plan was in vain in the end. Now the timeline, because of Chin Yu's appearance, is obviously 2 years ahead of schedule. It is still unknown to what level Wald's counterattack will evolve. However, thinking of when he was in the Chambord Islands, Hancock did not hesitate to lead the 9 snake pirates to help for his own safety. Chin Yu still kept his mind and looked for opportunities to contact Hancock. Captain, are you in a hurry? Dongli raised his head and took a sip of spirits before saying, we can set sail at any time. However, the bodies of our giants are relatively large. Judging from the boats you are on, captains, they should not be able to carry us. I'm afraid it will take some time to make a raft. As the strongest among the giants, he may not be the tallest existence in One Piece. But in terms of height, it also reaches 20 meters. According to Chin Yu, the 10-meter-long warship was probably not strong enough for them to turn over, so it sank directly. Captain, if you're really in a hurry, you can leave us a life card. You set sail first, and we'll catch up later. Brokey took a bite of the barbecue and immediately suggested. After all, this is a great waterway, and the weather is even more unpredictable. To build a huge raft that can withstand wind and rain is not something that can be done in a day or two. Facing Brokey's suggestion, Chin Yu frowned slightly and suddenly thought of a solution that would have the best of both worlds. He really does not have the ability to build such a big ship for the time being. However, in memory, there are ready-made big ships. How long does it take you to make the simplest raft? Chin Yu returned to the divine way. Easiest. Dongli raised his brows and said, about 7 or 8 days, at least we have to consider the dangers at sea. For the giants, they have the physical advantage. However, once you get to the sea, whether it is a giant or an ordinary person, if there is no boat, there is only one dead end. After all, not everyone is a Raleigh old pervert, able to swim across the entire sea without wind. 7 days. Chin Yu raised his brows and said, then you build a raft first, and I'll collect information first. At the same time, during this period of time, I will guide you in the use of your 2-color domineering. With your qualifications, it shouldn't be difficult to get a master. Armament hockey. Brokey and Dongli's eyes suddenly lit up. As a giant, he still remembers the scene when Chin Yu was stunned by a blow just now. Armament hockey, which is as black as ink. Even they feel tricky. What's more, in the duel for hundreds of years, they have already found themselves at a bottleneck. If you can take advantage of it, the practice of 2-color domineering will raise your strength to a level. In the future, it will become easier to restore the former glory for the giant family of Elbath. Teacher Laxus, please guide me to practice domineering together. A cold voice came out suddenly. Even Chin Yu was a little surprised when Sauron fell to the ground, kneeling and bowing to the ground. As one of the 3 main pirate hunters of the Straw Hat Pirates in the original book, Roroya Zoro, Chin Yu knew exactly how stubborn he was. When he was young, he was able to insist on the 3 swords that others laughed at, and challenged Guina thousands of times. This kind of feat is not a normal person can compare. However, looking around the entire Straw Hat Regiment, Zoro was undoubtedly the crew member with the most overall view. In the face of the lack of their own strength, there is a heart that quickly becomes stronger. However, he was willing to ask the enemy, Mihawk, the eagle eye of Chiwahai. Now Chinyu showed that the black knife he dreamed of had undoubtedly moved Soren's heart to become stronger. Zoorin, you promised to be my crew. Luffy exploded all of a sudden. Rarely escaped under Garp's hands and abducted 3 people as temporary crew members. If Chinyu was dug up, it would be difficult for Luffy to be blinded and fall in love with him in the future. Luffy, this is my apprenticeship, not to get on the boat. Zoro said in a deep voice. If you don't want to, the next time you are beaten up by your grandfather, I hope you can also apprentice. Even the Admiral of the Navy and the instructor personally invited. I believe that Teacher Laxus will never let us down. Looking at Sauron with a dignified expression, Chinyu was helpless. This step on the horse is to push him to the dead end. However, when I think of it, among the supernovae in the future, there will be people who have been trained by themselves. Perhaps, it can also cause turmoil in the world. You green algae head, are you planning to get rid of us? Sanji took a deep breath of his cigarette and said, count me in. Also count me, my uncle Usopp, but I have an amazing talent. Ah, you all signed up, then I can't be left. Count me in. Chapter 599 Mad Dog in the Sea. Seeing that a group of little fans were captured at once. Standing behind K. Rockthal, also stopped talking. Daz, do you want to sign up? Chinyu looked at Daz with interest. Originally, he, who was planning to stand firm, suddenly became discouraged and said, Mr. Laxus, count me in. Lord Rockdale, are you coming too? During this period of time, Chinyu's many means, but Daz was vividly remembered. Now, even Marshal Sengoku of the Navy headquarters and Zephyr, the chief instructor of recruits, have personally committed themselves and invited Chinyu to become an instructor of naval recruits. This is enough to prove that his teaching method is definitely the best at sea. Daz knew that he was older than Chinyu, but he still clearly knew the principle of being the best. In particular, I have personally seen Chinyu display the high-level domineering Chisakura and completely abuse the 2 giants behind the scenes. It also piqued his competitive spirit. I don't need it anymore. K-Rockdal glanced at Luffy and the others, his eyes twitched slightly, turned around and left. For him, as one of the dignified Chiwahai in the past, a long-established great pirate, he has to learn 2-color domineering with a group of little kids. Once this kind of thing spreads out, he can't afford to lose his old face. Lord Rockdale, Daz hesitated. However, before the words were finished, K-Rockdal turned into yellow sand and disappeared from sight. Haha, this kid looks like he likes face more than our 2 old guys. After taking a sip of wine, Dongli laughed heartily. But if I can, I really want to know what surprises the captain can give us when we go out. In the small garden, separated from the blank period of 100 years, they didn't know much about the people and things in the outside world. However, in the battle with Chinyu, both the combat power and the combat skills subverted their cognition. This undoubtedly makes the 2 giants see some hope for breakthroughs. For Dongli and Braki, who looked hopeful, Chinyu reluctantly touched the tip of his nose, and he was also full of expectations. In the original work, there are very few scenes given to giants. However, according to one of the 4 emperors, the Bigmom pirates, Charlotte Lingling. As long as he gets the alliance support of the giants, he can defeat Whitebeard, and Guy waits for the other 3 parties and 4 emperors. Become the real king on this sea. These words alone are enough to prove that Elbaf, the hometown of giants, was destroyed by Charlotte Lingling. But the nation of giants still exists, with a force too great to ignore. Now Qin has recruited 2 legendary giants, on the premise that he has already learned the stunts of giants to dominate the country. If you use domineering and Lu Ying, your strength will definitely jump several levels. At that time, it is still a big killer if it is not good. Chaotic thoughts flashed in Qin Yu's mind, and said, since you all want to learn, then in the next 7 days, I will try my best to teach you the knowledge of domineering. As for how much you can learn, that's all. It depends on personal understanding. Quote. Now, let's go to rest first, I still have something to deal with. After leaving these words, Qin Yu turned into a thunderbolt and swept away directly towards the mouth of the sea. On the other hand, within the naval headquarters, the huge discussion hall was already full of figures, and the first one was the Marshal Sengoku. Boom! The door was directly opened, and 3 burly bodies came in from the door. Seeing the appearance of the 3 generals, the expressions of the admirals present could not help but change slightly. They knew very well that during this period, due to the escape of the skeleton demon, the city prison was pushed forward, and a large number of prisoners fled. The 3 generals all left the headquarters and went to the various sea areas to capture the fugitives. The 3 strongest combat forces in the navy shot, and the good news came back one after another, and many big pirates were sent back to the advanced city prison. However, there are also many pirates with illustrious names who cannot be arrested. Just like the legendary pirate, the Golden Lion Shiki, who broke through the Chinda prison for the first time and successfully escaped from prison decades ago. You can't even control your whereabouts. Okay, since everyone is here, then I'll stop talking nonsense. Sengoku glanced at the 3 Akainu and went straight to the topic. During this time, you should also know that in the 6th floor of the advanced city, the big pirate who escaped from prison, the world destroyer Bundy Wald, is attacking the Tianlong people and the Navy branch, not even the pirates. Let go. It can be said that it is a mad dog. Whoever catches it bites whoever. 30 years ago, he was lawless. Now after getting out of trouble, he joins up with the remnants of the party, and what he does is even crazier. Having said that, Sengoku looked at Crane. Crane, the chief naval officer, instantly understood, picked up the projection phone bug in his hand and pressed it, and immediately switched it out. During this time, various sabotages from Wald. A marine branch of the Navy uses a merchant ship that uses heavenly gold. Outside the Judiciary Island, intercept pirate prisoners, pursue the Tianlong people, etc. For a time, the admiral in the field took a deep breath. In particular, the lieutenant generals directly under the branch were even more pale, obviously leaving bad memories. It has been 15 days since Wald escaped from the hands of General Qingzi. He has shot 12 times, each time causing a large number of casualties. In order to make you better understand the dangers of world destroyers, I will to repeat, 30 years ago, the key reason why we successfully arrested him. He glanced at Akainu and said in a deep voice. 30 years ago, we were able to take down this mad dog, not only because he challenged the justice of our naval headquarters, but also because he chilled the hearts of the pirates. Indirectly contributed to the alliance between the Navy and the pirates, forcing him to a dead end. So, this time, we have launched the Chiwahai recruitment order. Perhaps many of you will be dissatisfied, but for the justice of the Navy and the peace of this sea, the first thing we need to do is to subdue this the mad dog of the sea. Please remember, he was advancing on the 6th floor of the city, and the frozen island he suffered, but even the Golden Lion Shiji couldn't compare, because he is a lunatic, so when the decisive battle is over, no matter what Chiwahai does. As long as the cooperation agreement is not crossed, you must not take action against them, otherwise this time the encirclement and suppression will be destroyed, then our Navy will once again become a laughingstock. The awe-inspiring voice echoed in the huge discussion hall, and there was no way to disperse it for a long time. The expressions of the admirals changed. It's been decades since the first battle that day. Looking at them, the slightly older lieutenant generals are only about 50 years old. In the First World War at that time, it was just a newcomer's existence, not to mention participating in the war, and there was no chance to even play Chan Oil. Chapter 600-Navy Mobilization. The huge discussion hall fell into a dead silence. Facing the famous big pirate decades ago, the aged lieutenant general felt the same in his heart as the newcomer, and couldn't help but feel uneasy. Feeling the change in the atmosphere in the field, Akainu snorted coldly and said, "A product of the old era, under the trend of the times after 30 years, it is just a broken gear. Don't forget, the current Navy headquarters can't be compared in 30 years. With a lingering body, can it be compared with our Navy headquarters, which is constantly changing blood? If you are afraid, you can quit now and go back to the Naval Recruit Training Camp. Let the new Naval Recruit instructors invited by our Marshal give good guidance, and then come back to take up the post." The rolling voice caused the expressions of many admirals in the field to change slightly. Akainu's words were a bit too mean. However, the amount of information contained is also not small. At least, in their eyes, they all secretly had an eye on who the newly recruited instructor Sengoku was. Hearing this, Sengoku sighed faintly and said, "Akainu, Crane said this just to let them understand that you don't need to be serious about the risks of this battle. As for Laxus, it's Zepha, he, and I, the recruits who were recruited from outside after discussing together. You don't need to worry about the conflict not long ago." Thinking of the call not long ago, Akainu's attitude, Sengoku is also mentally prepared. However, he never imagined that Akainu would choose to erupt in such a place after a few days. How much hatred, how much hatred. Instead, I support Marshal Sengoku's proposal. As for Laxus, I met him in Rog Town. He is a rare physique and domineering powerhouse, and he has the ability of natural thunder fruit. If he can, it is used by our naval headquarters, which means that we may have a fourth major force in the future. Qingzi suddenly said. As soon as these words fell, the atmosphere in the field obviously reached a freezing point. A lot of people know that Akainu and Qingzi's tempers are a bit off. I just never thought that Qingji would say such words at such a juncture. The fourth major force. Akainu's face sank, and he stood up abruptly. Hot air waves surged out of his body. The gloomy eyes suddenly turned, locked on Qingzi's body, and said word by word. "Qingzi, do you mean that I am avenging my personal revenge? Don't forget that Walder slipped under your nose." "Really?" Qingzi let out a sigh of relief and met Akainu's gaze. "If you have to say that, did you catch that fellow, Earl Yuhi?" "You!" Akainu roared, and the devil fruit power dormant in his body was about to explode like a frenzy. "Enough, you two don't come here, you want to fight, and go to other places afterwards," Sengoku shouted coldly. "If you have this kind of energy, bring me back the escaped pirates, as well as the skeleton demon. I haven't been sitting here for a long time, and I will sit up if I feel like it. If anyone comes here blindly, don't blame me for letting Carp teach you a good lesson. Drop the gate and release Carp." Hearing Sengoku's astonishing words, the atmosphere immediately froze. It can be said that many people here are also growing up under Carp's eyelids. Also followed his subordinates. After all, as a Navy hero, he is an existence that newcomers look forward to. But it is precisely for this reason that many people have been subjected to Carp's iron fist of love. That is even the sharp cone of the green pepper, which can bend the existence. Yo-yo, Marshal Sengoku, you don't play your cards according to common sense, but Mr. Carp, why haven't you been here recently? Kizaru's wretched voice sounded in time to complete the field. Could it be that Mr. Carp is not going to participate in this mission? Hearing these words, the young general's presence suddenly regained their spirits. As a hero of the Navy, there is an existence that runs after the pirate King Roger in the sea. It can be said that no matter how much Garp hangs around, it is the existence they long for. Of course, if you know which battle in the Valley of the Gods, then Garp is even more reassured. Don't worry, I have asked Garp to come back as soon as possible. 10 days later, we will encircle and suppress Wald in the first half of the Great Waterway. I hope you don't drop the chain. Sengoku glanced at Akainu and Chingzi, and said in a deep voice. Next, Crane, assign your staff. Abandoning these words, Sengoku rubbed his swollen head and walked away quickly. After 7 days, the small garden. When the naval headquarters was in full swing, the siege event was being carried out. Chinyu and his party did not fall off the schedule. A raft that was more than 70 meters long, like an aircraft carrier, had already been suspended above the estuary. The two huge giant bodies walked out slowly, and the weapons had been replaced with rusted weapons on their backs. The cold light that circulated exudes a smell that penetrates the soul. As for Chinyu and his party, they had already boarded the pirate ship where Nami and Dasichi were staying. When Sauron first saw Dusky, he also mistakenly thought it was Dusky. However, whether it is a follow-up challenge or a domineering use. For this period of time, she followed Chinyu's side and received precise training, and she directly abused Sauron. In 7 days, 30 complete defeats. This fell into the mouth of Sanji, and riding a horse is a shame for a man. Of course, according to Sanji, seeing the beautiful women on board, he is more willing to be ashamed of being bullied by women. Mosamaxi, little brother, I'm Shachi. The voice of the phone bug rang suddenly. Chinyu glanced at it, closed his eyes and calmly, standing at the mouth of the sea, Dongli and Broki, took out the phone bug with his backhand. I'm Laxus, Miss Shachi, do you have any information? 7 days ago, after he returned to the pirate ship, he contacted Nico Robin, who used to be in charge of the Ba-Rock Work Club. Pity that as soon as the news of Kibu Heike Rock Doll's death was announced, the Ba-Rock Work Club immediately collapsed and scattered. Even Nico Robin couldn't get in touch with the billions of elders and others, let alone use the intelligence network that used to cover the first half of the Great Waterway to find information on the Navy and Wald. At the end, Chinyu remembered that in the Chambord archipelago, the proprietor's wife, Shachi, specialized in selling intelligence information. Brother Laxus, it seems that you are doing something unknown again. I heard that even the Navy invited you to join the Navy as a new instructor, and you killed Shichibu Heike Rockdal. During this time, you are Yuhi people in the sea. Shachi said with a teasing smile. These words made K. Rockdal's cheeks twitch standing not far from the deck of the ship. Although he died once, but now he is clearly alive, but is discussed by others as a dead person. This horse riding is suffocating.